podcast starts right now.
Welcome, everyone, to a special edition of the Blueline Bowhunters podcast. We are back here in the heart of Wisconsin in a cabin so buried and deep it took us 7 hours to get here.
It's top secret.
Middle of nowhere.
Top secret. Very fortunate to be here. Matt Steele, Jared Bruno, and obviously the great, legendary Donnie Vincent.
Hogwash.
Hogwash. I didn't mention the sweater this time. So.
Yep.
Donnie, thanks so much, man, for having us back here. This is incredible. Jared and I talked on the way over here. When we left here last year, I cried because I thought I'd never be back.
Yeah. Pat him on the back a little bit. Yeah. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
He did.
Last year was really fun, and it was really fun to leave you guys with Whitey.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
You know, and I think TJ was going through, like, he was, I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to give these guys Whitey, and he's like, sure. Okay. Yeah. And then, he was a little like,
on edge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sentimental.
Yeah.
We guys had 30 birds under Whitey.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Still have 30 birds. I'm sorry about that. I need to be better.
Dave Smith definitely got a kick out of that.
Yeah. So I don't know if you lied to us or not. I don't think you did. You've never told us a lie yet. But you're like, guys, I definitely take Dave Smith decoys all the time on the plane with me. All the time. Well, the looks we got going through Chicago Airport last year, I mean, it's interesting. Have you ever taken the full strutter decoy with you?
I have, yeah. And I had,
okay.
I had, the guy was awesome. I'll never forget him, but it's kind of I don't know where I was, maybe Nashville. And it was this black guy, handsome guy, and he was kind of a large gentleman, and he's running through all my stuff, and then he's hitting the button, and it's going through, and he's like, whoa. What is that?
Oh yeah,
did the same thing.
It's turkey decoy, and he's sitting there, and he said, "Yeah, it really looks like a turkey." I said, "Yeah, it's a carver, and a friend of mine, Dave Smith, he carves them, makes these molds, and it's the hands down the best goose decoys, best deer decoys, turkey decoys. Like the guy's unbelievable." And he's like, "Yeah, and that looks really real." And he's like, "Oh, that's so cool!" And he just hits the button again, and right behind it was my dead bird. and then it goes into the X-ray, and he goes, "Hey, you got one?"
Yeah,
and I go, "Yeah, I got one." And,
it worked.
Yeah,
it worked.
It was really funny because I just had all my turkey pieces frozen, and then just taking them on the airplane.
Because we're police officers, and so police officers and hunters, maybe in Chicago don't get along that great. You know?
Yeah.
So. I think it was Jared that came up with our little fabricated backstory, and it just kept growing and growing.
Definitely a conversation starter.
People loved us, though.
Yeah.
People thought we were great. But
they came in over and talked to you because of Whitey?
Oh my God, yeah. Flocked to us, literally.
Flocked to us. Yeah. I like that. But Jared came up with the backstory that we worked for National Geographic, and we were on a turkey hunting photo shoot. Because he had the big camera bag,
Yep.
We were on a turkey hunting photo shoot, and that we clipped a GoPro to the top of Whitey, and we just wanted to see the mating habits of the eastern turkey in Wisconsin. I mean, the lie went deep. And then, the thing about a lie is once you get going, you kind of just steamroll into it.
Have fun with it.
But the best part is we're getting on the plane in Chicago to fly to Pittsburgh, and Whitey. Before we were able to sit them between Jared and I because there was no other person. That was from Minneapolis to Chicago.
Yeah.
But here it was packed flight.
We were sweating.
So we're trying to make Whitey our personal item and storm below us.
Yeah.
Under the seat.
Yeah, he doesn't fit under the seat.
I was punching that sucker. Yeah. I was like,
come on, Whitey.
Yeah.
Didn't work. Lady goes, you're going to have to check that. So here we are. Having to check my most prized possession from Donnie Vincent.
Yeah, she's like, what is that?
I'm like, Donnie Vincent autographed this.
Yeah.
He killed 30. I didn't say that because obviously I have this live National Geographic on. So we start walking up. I'm crying because we're going to check Whitey. And I'm like, God knows what happens to him down there. And the pilots are standing there at like the cockpit door. And they're like, what's that? So I give them the backstory of how we're National Geographic.
Lie builds up more, yeah.
And they go, they walk over.
We'll take them up in the cabin.
The pilots have like this humongous storage area for all their stuff. They take their bags out. Did we tell you this?
Whitey flew an airplane?
Yeah, Whitey flew an airplane. Yeah.
Take their bags out. They check their own bags, these pilots do, and they put Whitey up there.
Yep.
Whitey got the jump seat.
Whitey
got
famous.
the jump seat.
Yeah. Whitey is famous.
Whitey in Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
That is,
Basically, him and Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
are you serious?
Dude, 100%. That I know I've told you a lot of lies in this story. This is 100% the truth.
Loosely 100%.
Loosely 100%. That was our catchphrase last year. But so anyhow, man, it's just it's been incredible to. I never in a million years thought when I watched The Rivers Divide with this cool guy named Donnie Vincent that I'd be sitting at your cabin and call you a friend. So thanks for that, man.
No, man, it's been great that you guys wanted to come out, and with all the garbage that's happened in the last couple of years, and you guys reached out and said, can we do a podcast? And we're officers in Pennsylvania, and I was just like, somebody has got to step up and start doing some things for first responders, firemen, policemen, and that's why I was just like, yeah, if we're going to do this, let's do something that's real and something that's cool, and let's actually share some sunrises and some weather and gobbles and then that gives us an opportunity to
connect and just do
and see who we are and see what you guys are about and I very much, and it's funny because I'm a guy that in my life has been pulled over
right
a number
Dude,
of
every
times.
time I talk to you, you have a new pulled over story. So I was going 80.
Yeah. And that's what it is. But I've always had a really good rapport with police officers, either as friends or even getting pulled over.
And that's cool with making that connection with somebody who's not in law enforcement that wants to spend time with somebody in law enforcement that we're trying to change the narrative of how outsiders view us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's
and I
awesome.
think that's, like goes along with the podcast from last year. You become such a steward in the hunting world of trying to change, people's views. I always love how you get so many haters whenever you post something.
Sure.
And I love that you approach them with such respect of like, listen, this is an animal. It roams the earth. I made the heavy burden responsible choice to take its life, but I am literally using this animal to sustain my life.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you just do it with such respect, and you're so genuine, and that's why we love following you and having the opportunity to come up here and be with you.
I appreciate that.
And so I think Jared and I, with the police world and the hunting world, it's very parallel. We're both fighting the same battle, and that's we're fighting the battle too for the hunting world as well.
Yeah.
Just the kind of hate that we're getting both as police officers and as hunters. It's very similar. But you've been such a steward for it. But last year, I don't know why you did this to me, but we did these 2 great podcasts, and then we shut off the camera. We shut this off. We're like, thanks, man. This is awesome. And Donnie's like, it'd be a great idea.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where was this 2 hours ago?
Did we do 2 podcasts last
We did
year?
2 podcasts, yeah. Obviously, it was memorable. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, it's so good that it all blends.
No, it did. It was we took like a 5-minute break and we did the second
Then we
one.
second, okay. Yeah.
So, no, but you're like, it'd be really cool. I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me like, what's my favorite hunt or what's the most dangerous hunt I've ever been on? I'm like, no one's ever asked you that before? Like on podcasts? And it's because, you become a legend with, living with wolves. Mm-hmm. The mountain lion story with you carrying that mountain lion out on your back. That's just hanging here behind the camera. The Rivers Divide, hunting Steve, the bear at, what was that, 11 yards?
7 steps, something like that, 6, 7
Yeah,
steps.
I mean, those are the stories that stick. But so it gave us the idea to do this podcast, and we're going to start out with the most, I guess, there's 2 parts, like the time that you're the most scared, so the scariest hunt you've ever been on.
Yep.
And then maybe the most dangerous hunt, or are those one and the same?
Yeah, they're pretty much the same, and I don't have a scariest hunt that I've been on. I mean, if you said pick this most afraid you've ever been on a hunt, it's probably Winds of Adak. It's probably the most out of control I've ever felt, the most at mercy with it, not only, a lot of times I'm sitting in a Super Cub behind a pilot, and like sometimes I've been flying into blizzards, or I've been flying into, the plane is all over the place, or we're in between cliffs and the plane's all over the place, and I'm looking at the guy in front of me who's the pilot, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm flying with, a friend of mine named Clint, who's an unbelievable pilot, or I'm flying with a friend of mine named Jeremy, who's an unbelievable pilot, and I just have this release of kind of responsibility. It's like, I put my trust in these guys. No matter how this goes, I'm all in.
Right,
like, we're in this together. I'm all in. And I've had some airplane trips, of course, that were nail biters. And probably my worst one, actually, oddly enough, has been here in Wisconsin. But in the winds of Adak, being in the Bering Sea with the waves as big as they were, and then with how disorganized they were, and then having the entire crew on a boat and 2 captains, and I can see that the captains are nervous, and we're down an engine, and I just couldn't do the math in my head. The story was not adding up. We had really deep water coming to really shallow water, like, I forget what it is, but it's like 15,000 feet deep, coming up to 500 feet deep, and which pushes all of this really sharp waves that come flying up this wall. And the current was going one way, basically on its way to Hawaii. The wind was going another way. And it was a bathtub. It was a bathtub of peaks. And our boat would slide down some, and the captain's yelling at us. And I was outside the boat holding onto this, the metal rod that goes up for the canopy. And the captain's like, man, you got to I need you inside, because we're probably going to capsize. We're probably going to capsize tonight. And if we do, you're gone. There's no way you're going to be able to hold on upside down, and it's going to take the next wave that's going to right us. But you can't hold on that whole time underwater, and you're not going to be able to find the doorknob. And I was like, well, if I feel like that's going to happen, I'll come inside. But I wanted to be outside, and rain is pouring down, and the waves are coming so over my head that all the water's going into my hood of my rain jacket and pouring, like it's pouring right now at the cabin. Like, tubes of water are pouring out of my sleeves and out of my bottom. And he literally said, and we went through all that, and I'm watching, we have cameras on board, of course, and I don't care about the cameras, but we're sliding off of a wave, and I can see the cameras tumbling in the cabin, smashing against the other wall. I see the captain doing the same thing, and he's not a small man, but I see him flying through the air, and then I see him scrambling to get back to the wheel. And we're going through all this, and then we get through the first part, and then the seas kind of go back to just rough seas. And he's like, hey, when we get to where we're going, I forget what he said, but it's basically like, you have an hour to find a bull, kill a bull, and get that bull back on this boat, or we very likely might not make it home tonight.
Miss the window.
Yeah, we might. And and he's talking about, I think he was inferring that we might lose our lives tonight.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough,
pretty heavy.
And so when we go to shore and we find that caribou that's
winded on the beach,
snagged,
entangled in the net,
like a fishing net, right?
Yeah, it's fishing. It's rope. It's actually that rope right there.
Yeah,
and I have the rest of it downstairs. But so we have to free him, and then we go out onto the beach, and then we found this herd, and there's 2 big bulls in it, and I shot the first bull, and then actually you see that single caribou antler right there.
Yeah.
So there's another bull with just the 1 antler. So he had dropped an antler because of malnutrition or for whatever reason. And these caribou are eating themselves out of house and home. And why I thought this was a good idea, I have no idea. But so I just shot that one, and he went down. I shot him again. And then this bull was walking by with 1 antler, and I'm like, racked the bolt on the Benelli Lupo and dropped him. And so then we had to go, get these bulls, and we filmed it.
So
but
2 bulls.
2 bulls. Shot 2 bulls.
Yep.
Have an hour.
Yep.
Shoot
Yep.
2 bulls. Clean 2 bulls.
They didn't clean them,
Yeah.
and gutted them, which we would never do. Like, we would skin any caribou I've ever killed in my life, or moose or Dall sheep. You skin them and then break them down the quarters and rib cages
Flip
and neck
them
meat.
over, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And so you're either going up the spine and going all the way down, removing all that meat, and then going all the way down, removing all that meat, taking the head off, and that's how you're carrying it out. Or if you're going to do a full body mount or something like that, you might flip it onto its back and then go ventrally up the middle and then flay everything off one side and then break the animal down that way. These we gutted, and then me and the whole crew, we dragged them. And the captain, he told us afterwards, he's like, you guys were sprinting along the tundra, and we each had like 3 guys on 1 caribou dragging it.
Yeah, right.
We would drag it 200 yards, run back, grab the other caribou. But that caribou, and I've never told this story ever, so I shoot it, and it goes literally, you hear the bullet whack.
Yep.
Bull goes, he just down. So I go over to the other bull, and we get it gutted, and we pull it up. And no, that's not true. We are walking down to the other bull, and then one of the photographers that we were with, he goes, well, look at that bull. Look at that caribou's bleeding. And I turned my head, and it was this bull. He got back up
yeah.
and was walking, and but he didn't have any antlers anymore. So I was like, okay, so his antler, I'm like, that has to be the bull that I just shot, because the blood was exactly where my bullet went, is running down, and he didn't have an antler, so I just racked another one, and I had my I was wearing a Barney's backpack, so I just dropped my backpack, put the rifle on top of the frame, shot. He immediately went down right away again, and he was dead this time, like done. I don't know what happened with the first round, but sometimes when you shoot animals, weird things happen. And
right.
It was a great placement. I just don't know what happened. But anyway, so then we drag these bulls. So with the antlered bull, we'd grab onto his antlers. There's 4 of us basically, or 3 of us, and we would drag him as fast as we could drag him, and then we'd go back to the unantlered bull and grab onto his front feet and just drag him as fast as we could. And then we got him all the way down to the beach. The bull that we had cut free was still there. He was still he would bed down, and then he'd get up and eat grass, then he'd bed down, and he was just getting back to...
getting his senses back.
Yep. And we put those bulls on the boat, and we were all like hugging, and like we had went through a treacherous water on the way here that it just brought us closer together. We had to work together as a team. We had to over-communicate when we were in those waters, and I had quite honestly, I had questions for the captain. I was just like, man, I don't know what can this boat, it was a Northwoods boat, extremely capable vessel, and Corey, extremely capable captain, and his co-captain Scott, and so, but we were just like so thankful we got these bulls and we got them on board, and now we're going home, and it was kind of like the perfect storm.
Yeah.
And so the seas are big, but we know what's coming.
Right.
We have to drive through the same section that we drove through on the way there, but now we have to do it closer to dark. And now it's going to be even worse because the wind is up more, the swell is up more. Like whatever we went through, it's 15% worse or 20% worse on the way home. And it was.
And if you miss that window of where you're trying to hit, the nearest place you'd wash up is Hawaii, basically.
It's a problem. Yeah. And in fact, Corey, fast forward a year, and Corey was over there exploring again, and he ended up finding a vessel had sank.
I remember the story from
sand?
Yeah.
So
that I wanted to ask you if that was the same place.
Yep.
Yeah, same place. And
ADAC.
that vessel had sank, and it was a total loss of life. And then Corey went back and to the similar area, and he sees a life raft up on shore, and then he goes up there, and he's like, okay, potentially somebody took this. Somebody was in this potentially and got this to shore. And then he went up there, and he's like, if I were here, where would I look for shelter? And he said there was this little cutout on the beach, and he said he walked up there and showed me pictures, but it's just the dude was right there dead, and it looked like a Pirates of the Caribbean movie scene,
coming out of the sand.
Yeah, you could see his skull, and the sand had just perfectly was wind blown off of his bones. You could see his teeth. There's no hair or skin. You could see his phalanges and his feet and like his rib cage. It just literally looked like you're in Disney World looking at a scene, and from the movie, and it was just wind blown right there.
And if I remember right, when you told us this story last year, he called it in, but they said, well, just mark it, drop a pin.
Yeah, we're not going there.
Yeah,
we're not going there.
out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Coast Guard said no. Troopers said no. Yeah. And then he did it anonymously. Did I tell you guys this story last year?
Yeah, well, no.
You touched on it.
It was, yeah.
So then he reported anonymously because he didn't want to. He just was be doing his own thing. And then the troopers ended up calling him and being like, Corey, a guy found a body out there. And he's like, you guys, it was me. I found the body out there.
That was you.
And and so, but he's an awesome boat captain, and he goes in this stuff all the time. But it was very, like if you're way up on a tree, or you have a grizzly bear that just charged you, or you have to wade across a river, or all of these things, you're looking at them as a calculated risk. Like if I say, hey, we got to climb 60 foot into this tree, and you're 60 feet in this tree, and you're nervous, you're afraid of heights, and you're looking, I have to make sure my hands are holding on. I have to make sure I'm pushing with my legs. I have to make sure at all times I know where my safety rope is. I need to know how I'm going to move through these limbs. you're doing the math in your head. When we were in this water, I couldn't do the math. The waves were too big and they were too disorganized. I didn't see how we were going to make it through. Mm-hmm. I just took it 1 second at a time, but 1 minute you're skidding down a wave, and the next minute the boat is falling what feels like 20 feet and then slamming into the bottom. And then on our way home, it was just like a perfect storm. We're just, and you can see the black line in the distance. And, just, and then all of a sudden it's, and the boat like skidding down. Then all of a sudden, like you just see like you go from 1 second, all the waves are going in one direction,
and then all of a sudden you get whacked. You
enter into that where that current changes, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, like 1 second, like I'm alive right now, and if I hold on for dear life and everything works out, I'm going to be alive in another 60 seconds, and then we rolled up finally. Chose was there, and we rolled up finally at like 2 a.m. They were flying. We didn't know this. They were flying drones because they were thinking they were going to have to call the Coast Guard. So they were flying drones as high as they could on ADAC to see if they could see our lights coming at all. And I think they finally did at one point, but it was
That's crazy.
I have stories like that or experiences like that. And then I have other experiences like hunting doll sheep in October in the Chugach Mountains of Alaska, where we're having like crossing cliffs that are not cliffs like straight up and down, but cliffs like
almost a knife edge.
Very, very steep.
4 or 5% grade.
Yeah, very, very steep, and they're icy. And there's skiffs of snow, but it's kind of like your worst nightmare. If you lose your footing, you're going to slide 60, 70 feet, and then the grade's going to get even steeper, and then you're going to slide 100 feet, and at the bottom of that 100 feet is 1,000 feet, literally straight down.
Drop, yeah.
And so I'm going after a sheep, William Altman and we're one-handed. So I have my bow in one hand, and I'm holding on with my fingers with the other hand. William has his camera in one hand, and he's holding on with fingers, and we have another photographer who stayed back on the side of a canyon, and he's filming us like in this blizzard. I showed you guys that little kind of teaser from of the work we're working on now, and you see me in those whites, and you see it blowing like 60. That was that day.
Oh, okay.
So it's blowing like 60 or 70 miles an hour, like hurricane force winds, and we're crossing these cliffs. And so like you're digging we both wear hanbogs, and you're digging the sole of your boot, like you're looking at how your sole is going into the rock, and then you're shifting your weight like, okay, I think that's going to hold. And then you're fingernailing things, and then you commit to the step and putting your boot at the next little ledge that you envision. And then you're sinking the boot in there, and there's no sand, there's no gravel, like you're on rock, you're on granite. So there's no give and take. And then the spot we had to cross was only maybe, but it was 30 yards, something like that. But
probably felt like 1,000.
It felt, and then we get over there, and there's big, deep, rolling, puffy, snowy kind of
like drifts.
Kind of drifts going down, and the ram was laying bedded below one of them, and we could see his horns. And we were maybe 50 yards away, which I would have shot him from 50, but we had to get to like 25 before we could see his vitals. Right. So we're going down, and then all of a sudden I just happen to look over. It's a full blizzard, like it's blowing 60, 70, like I said, and it's snowing. And I happen to look across the canyon, and I see our second photographer, and he's wearing all whites, but I can see him. He's just standing up, just like there's a problem. He wouldn't be standing up otherwise. And so I'm glassing him, and I can see him with someone else's binoculars, and he's looking. He can't even locate us. We're not 100 yards away, and he's just scanning everywhere looking for us. I can see it. And I set my bow down, and I'm going like this, and he never ever saw us.
Wow.
Never, when we finally got back over there. But anyway, when we were going down to that ram, the wind was blowing from our left to our right, and it was just and then it just went, and that one little, our wind swirled and went to the ram, and he stood up, and the snow was coming down, and the other guy got it, but he stood up, and he's just looking around. He turned, and he just walked away into like Frosty the Snowman. He just walked away into the snowflakes and just disappeared, and then so now, crossing the 30 yards, the first time we had this treasure that we were going after and crossing on the way back. Like this is the last day of season. So we're crossing it to go home now. So it's like, okay, it was thrilling the first time.
Yeah. This time?
Thrilling and terrifying. Now it's terrifying. And so, but we went back over, but I was so proud of like my guys and I was so proud of myself. Like it was snowing and blowing and like we were up in the cliffs and we almost got this sheep. And that's the part of the hunter that I am that, it's not lost on me. Like I came out of there with a,
experience.
Yeah. Like no, I didn't punch my tag, but I don't care. Like it was incredible.
Badass.
Yeah. So, things like that. And then, there's been times in Australia with crocodiles and different species of snakes and things like that I've, but those aren't
snakes.
Yeah.
Those aren't scary,
yeah.
but,
Australia's crazy.
Australia will kill you in a minute. Yeah.
Really fast. Yeah. And, but those are the things that really come to mind. I've had some flights. Like I said, I flew through a thunderstorm in Wisconsin one time. That was
the thing that sticks out to me about those stories. So, like, with the Winds of Adak, which if you guys haven't checked that out, it's a fantastic
it's unreal.
Cinematic event that you guys did.
It was fun, yeah.
Just really, really cool. Should check that out. But the things to me that stuck out about those stories is, so when it came to the Winds of Adak, you're on a boat, you have no control.
Zero.
And when you're on these airplanes, or what they call airplanes, gliders, whatever, with a propeller, no control. And I think that's one thing in my life that it's like we just went on a trip. My wife and our family went on a trip, and it's still like I'm on a commercial jetliner, and sitting in that seat, 34D. I'm just like, I have zero control over this right now, and it's a tough thing to give up that control. At least when you're going after that sheep, it was Donnie Vincent's decision to take that next step, to grab those rocks, And there's a piece, I think, in being in control. It takes a lot to let go of that control, especially on those planes that you're getting on.
And with the planes, it's, you pick your pilots, right? And so the guys that I fly with, and unfortunately, like Jim Tweedo, he just lost his life last spring, which is heartbreaking because he's such an amazing man, such a special individual, and so wickedly, wildly talented in an airplane. I've flown with him a number of times, and he was as talented as it gets. And so then when someone like Tweedo has an incident, it can happen to anyone. And so when you pick your pilots and you pick where you're going, and I know a lot of guys that go to Alaska and they just go with a pilot, but like the guys that I fly with, it's not because I'm chicken. I want to fly with these guys that know their airplanes inside and out, like Jim did. And I want to fly with these guys that they're risk takers, because to do really special things, you have to be a risk taker, but they're doing it in as calculated a fashion as possible. And they are wickedly talented, very, very smart individuals. And so I'm able to kind of relinquish to them. And I also think, I'm 49, I'm going to be 50 in October. And even when I was 30, and even when I was 25, sitting in those same airplanes, when I was 25, I wasn't sitting there thinking, I've got my whole life ahead of me. I was sitting there thinking, I've had a pretty kick-ass 25 years. Right. If I don't see 26, let's go.
Yeah, right.
And then now I'm just thinking, now it feels like, and I'm sure like when people are, I just lost my dad, right? And, and like he's 82. I'm sure when he's 82, like, he's nearing, he's at the end, Yeah.
Right.
But I kind of feel like I'm at the end right now at 50. You know what I mean? Because I feel like 50's there's so many people that don't even see 50. So I feel so fortunate to have 50 and to have seen and experienced the things that I've experienced at 50, that if I'm in an airplane this fall and it's not going well, like, I'll be scared and I'll be sad, that I know, like I'll be thinking of my son when that's going down. But beyond that, like, it's, you just got to take it one day at a time and one step at a time. But you have to keep living.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to kind of change gears a little bit. So like your most dangerous hunts, or times you were scared of your life, you shared a fantastic story with us last year at dinner. That was incredible. And it wasn't so much that you were scared for your life, maybe a little bit, because the situation you were in, your life would have been pretty much over. Would you mind sharing the story with our listeners of you in Russia? I think you were on a sheep hunt.
I was wondering where you're going.
I looked over and saw your face, and I saw a lot of worry. I'm like, I'll land my plane here soon.
I do have. I have another hunting story that I'll tell you guys off air. I don't know if I'll ever be able to tell us one on air.
I'm fine with that.
Have I told you guys my greatest hunting story ever? Like, I call it my greatest hunting story ever.
No.
Okay. It's not one that many people can hear.
Okay.
But it's.
Well, sorry guys, we're not going to fill you in on that, but I still want to hear it.
Yeah.
But the story I'm talking about, it was a sheep hunt. I don't think you were successful on it. You did connect.
Yes.
And I don't even know how you go about hunting in Russia. Maybe touch on that a little bit of how you end up over there hunting, rules and regulations of hunting Russia. But there was actually just a thing kind of similar to I thought of you here before we left on our trip to go out of the country, where there was a father of two and his wife went on a trip, and I don't even remember the country, so I'm not going to say it, but he used a bag that he uses for hunting, and they found a hunting shell within his bag.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And he's now in prison, possibly looking at 12 years, and he's just like a blue-collared worker that was on vacation with his family that forgot that there was a shotgun shell or a rifle shell in his bag, and now he's looking at spending his next 12 years while his kids grow up in prison for a harmless mistake.
Well, and it won't go well either. I don't know what country he's in, but when you're in these other countries, I've never been in prison in another country. But if you're in prison in another country, it's not going to go well. Like, prisoners aren't going to find out
unless you're Brittany Griner, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that's
we won't go down that road.
It's more than a whole other story.
Yeah, but anyhow, would you mind sharing that story, because you're so serious with us, where you're like, I contemplated something, I'm going to leave the big build up to you.
I did, yeah.
We just stared at each other and like, all right, sounds good.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Something to share with two police officers, but so ultimately, when I was growing up, and I'll get there quickly, but when I was growing up, one of the things that was most assured is that I wanted to hunt sheep. Like, that was, of all the other things that I wanted to do, I wanted to hunt Dall sheep, and particularly Dall sheep. And so when I was in high school, this is way before, basically internet stuff, but I'd get in the backs of magazines, and I would call outfitters, like Bonnet Plume and Ram's Head and all these Canadian outfitters. I would call them, and they'd answer the phone, hey, this is, so-and-so Bonnet Plume Outfitting. And I'd say, hey, listen, I'm just a kid. I don't have any money. I'm not going to come Dall sheep hunting, but I want to talk to you about how Dall sheep hunting went this year for you, if you'll give me the time. And almost always they'd say, hey, listen, I can't do it right now, but call me in 2 months. Like, call me back in March when all the shows are over with or whatever, and I'll be happy to, pour a cup of coffee, and I'll tell you about the sheep. I'll tell you some sheep stories, and I'll tell you about our success this year. So I used to call these outfitters just to talk to them about, basically I wanted them to verbalize their brochure to me and tell me about it. So I was in a hunting camp in Illinois, hunting whitetails, and through a variety of things, I had purchased a raffle ticket. I don't even know through who it was through anymore. Through, let's just say Wild Sheep Foundation. It wasn't them, but it was like Grand Slam Ovis Club or something like that. And I purchased a raffle ticket. It was like 5 tickets for $300 or something like that. So I bought a raffle ticket. And when I was bow hunting in Illinois, I found out that one of the places that I've always wanted to hunt Dall sheep is in the Bonnet Plume in the Yukon territories. And so while I'm in Illinois, I find out that one of my friends is actually friends with the new outfitter that runs the place. And so I was like, oh, that's really cool. I want to hunt there someday. And he's like, let me tell you when you want to hunt there, and I'll set it all up. Chris McKinnon's a good friend of mine. He's an awesome pilot. He's an awesome sheep hunter. He loves sheep. Like, you'll have a great time. So I was like, that's awesome. Lo and behold, long story short, I ended up winning grand prize in this sheep hunting raffle.
No way.
I did. And I was having a miserable day. And the guy's name, I think, is Dennis Campbell. And he called me one day, and I just got in an argument with a friend of mine, and I answered the phone, and I was like, what? And he just started laughing. And I go, who is this? And he's like, this is Dennis Campbell. And I go, no way. And he just kept on laughing. Because I know there's only one reason he's calling me.
Yeah.
So he's like, you won grand prize of our raffle. It was called the Raffle Rama.
Oh my.
And he goes, you won grand prize of Raffle Rama. And I go, what did I win? And he goes, you can either go on an all expense paid trip to the Bonnet Plume and hunt Dall sheep, which is where I've always wanted to hunt Dall sheep, and where I killed that sheep right there. I killed that sheep in the Bonnet Plume.
Huh.
I'll pick it up here in a second. But so I can either go to the Bonnet Plume, or I can go to Kulu Safaris in Russia and hunt snow sheep, which is essentially like a stone sheep before it crosses the Bering Ice Bridge to come to North America. So I was like, okay. I was like,
what a choice.
Yeah. I was like, when do I have to make choice? He's like, you have, like 7 days or whatever, because how they did the raffle, whichever one I chose, like second place got the one that I didn't choose.
Oh, wow.
So,
second place, still pretty good.
Yeah. And
right.
So I called my buddy in Illinois, and I was like, hey, I won this prize. And he's like, okay, call Chris and talk to him about it. Cause I was like, I don't know what to do. So I called Chris, and he said, listen, do you have any means at all to come sheep hunting here in the future? And I said, yeah, I do. I said, I think I can swing it. I said, if I save for it and we plan years in advance, I think I could come. He's like, well, I'll tell you what, go to Russia with your ticket, because he had heard, well, he goes, first of all, and look at where we are right now, but he goes, first of all, you never know when Russia is going to close to Americans.
Right,
you never know. It's a volatile system. So A, you never know. And B, he said, I have heard that when you go hunting sheep or whatever you're hunting in Russia on one of these raffles, that they take really good care of you, because they want you to basically return home with really positive, feedback. And
now knowing where this story's going, that's awesome.
yeah. So he said, I'll tell you what, Chris said, go to Russia and then book a sheep hunt with me. So I booked a sheep hunt with him right then for the future. And then I ended up calling Dennis, and I was like, yeah, I'll go to Kulu Safaris in Russia. And he's like, awesome, we'll set it all up. So he set it all up, and I'll get there as fast as I can. So
Take your time.
I go to Russia, which back in the day, people used to fly from Anchorage to Petropavlovsky, which is right across the ocean there, and it's like a pretty quick flight. Well, that was closed to Americans at this time. So I had to fly to Atlanta, Georgia, from Atlanta, Georgia to Moscow, Russia, which was 13 hours in an airplane. Then I had to fly, like, people don't realize how big Russia is. Then I had to fly from Moscow, Russia to Magadan, which was also 13 hours in a flight. And so, like, by the time I get into Magadan, well, first of all, I'm in Moscow, and which was a cool city, but it felt like a dangerous city, but it was definitely a very cool city. And I was staying at a Marriott, and it was beautiful. Like, the women were beautiful, the men were handsome. I did notice that in Russia, the men were either 5'5" or 6'5". Like, those were the two.
Big disparity.
Yeah, it was like you were either a little guy or a monster.
Yeah.
And like, I remember the cars out in front of the hotel were like Lamborghinis everywhere, Ferraris, like all these really expensive stuff. So anyway, the next morning I had to fly from Moscow to Magadan. And so my cab driver didn't speak English. So I'm like, I need to go to Magadan. And he knew I was an American. So he's like, basically in very broken English, he's like, I got it. Like, yeah, I got it. I know what you're doing. So he thinks I'm flying international because I'm an American. So he drops me off at the wrong airport. So I roll into the international airport in Russia with my rifle. They wouldn't allow me to bow hunt. So I've got my rifle. I roll in there, like, police officer stops me immediately. He's got a long gun. He's like, stop, put it down. And they had an x-ray, like, right there, like right at the doors, they had x-rays. He runs it through, and he's like freaking out that I have a weapon. He's talking to this other guy, and the other guy's like, he only spoke Russian. So he talks to the other guy. There's another guy, and he's like, hey, I speak English. What's going on? I go, I'm going sheep hunting. And he's like, where are you flying? I go, Magadan. He's like, you need to be at the domestic airport. You're at the international airport. I was like, oh, the cab driver saw that I was American. And he's like, he thought he was helping me out. He's like, I know you're flying home. I know what you're doing. You're flying home. Yeah. I've got you. So then I had to take a cab ride over to the domestic airport. I get there, I get out, and there was a guy who was helping me kind of like mitigate things going in when I was in the city. So I roll up and he's like, "Hey, where have you been?" And I'm like, the guy brought me to he's like, "Dude, you're going to miss your flight in like 5 minutes." He's like, "You have literally like 5 minutes to get on your airplane." I was like, "How am I going to go through security?" He's like, "We're going to bribe all the guards. We're going to bribe everyone as we go through here." He's like, "Do you have cash?" And a buddy of mine had hunted Russia twice, once for bears, once for moose. And I asked him when I was going, I was like, "What do I need?" He's like, "Bring a ton of crisp $100 bills, like whatever you can afford, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, bring it because you bribe the whole way along." So we go to security and the guy's like, "Yeah, you're going to miss your flight." And the driver's like, "Are you sure we're going to miss our flight?" And he's like, "No, you should be okay." He's like, "But you have way too many bags." And the guy's like, "Are you sure we have too many bags?" He's like, "No, you should be okay." And which was funny because I was sitting there thinking like, okay, so there's a weight limit on an airplane. And if we're all bribing, like, how do you get an accurate weight of what is going to be on this airplane? But anyway, so we're along for the ride and end up getting on the airplane and fly to Magadan, and which is like, it's like getting off the airplane in Red Dawn, in the movie Red Dawn. Like buildings are crumbling and walls are crumbling, and like everyone has a machine gun other than you. And
you have a bolt action rifle.
Yeah, which was, and then also the other really funny thing is you get into the hotel, which is this dilapidated, looked like worn torn. At least that's how it appeared to me. And then also still like all the girls that were there were absolutely like supermodels. And I was like, what, holy cow. And they're all just doing their thing. And I went to my room, and so I ended up going on the hunt. We fly out in these big Russian helicopters, like just like something you'd see in.
This was all expenses paid.
All expenses paid, yeah.
That's so crazy. I can't imagine these flights. And
so I'm going on, I'm filming this with a little disc camera. They wouldn't allow me to bring a photographer. I petitioned for it, and the country wouldn't let me bring it. So I brought this little camera, and I was filming, and so I see them fire one of the helicopters off. When I start filming it, and then they power it down, and then they start this one over here. So I'm like, oh, we must be taking this one. And then I'm filming all these helicopters. And then finally I asked one of the guys, I was like, "Hey, which helicopter are we taking?" And he's like, "I don't know." He's like, "Whichever one runs today."
Oh my God.
I was like, okay, this is so cool. So they finally get one up and running, and I get onto the helicopter. There's no seatbelts. There's no seats. Like, I literally sat on a giant green diesel fuel tank in the helicopter, and there's gear everywhere, and the pilots are smoking, and it was like I was in a movie. You know, it was just like, this is pretty cool. And and so, but going into the country, when I'm filling out all the documents, they're like, "What do you have?" I'm like, "I have a bolt action rifle." And they said, "How many rounds do you have?" And so everything I had, they would open the boxes. And I forget, I think I had 40 rounds. What comes in a box? 20?
20,
Yeah, so I had 40 rounds. And so they're like, "Okay, you have 40 rounds." So I had to write bolt action rifle, 40 rounds. And there's a 300 Winchester short mag. And so then I go on the hunt, and I meet up with the guy, this super cool dude. His name Vasily. He's got all gold teeth.
Oh, wow.
He's native. He's not white. He's native, so he kind of looks like an Eskimo. Our Eskimos, but and he just doesn't speak any English. Awesome dude. We had such a great time together. And then he had a translator named Misha, and he could speak a little bit of English. And so like, we land out there, boom, 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 and they open up the helicopter, and they take out these big, huge spruce poles, and they set up this spruce pole wall tent, and they had all these fresh groceries, and it was just awesome. And and we slept on sheepskins. Like, nobody had any sleeping pads, but they rolled out sheepskins, and we'd set our sleep bags up on the sheepskins, and we'd just sleep right on the, you know, we're nearing the Arctic Circle, or just above the Arctic Circle, so we're on this like rock. There's not really that many trees, and we'd have fresh salads, and we drink these huge beers, like whether you want to drink alcohol or not. Like, you're drinking a huge shot of vodka, and you're having a huge beer just about every meal. Like, right. You know,
because that's what they do.
That's what they do. And these guys were awesome, and we had an awesome hunt, and we saw before I went on the hunt. I met another hunter in camp, and it was actually the guy, his great-grandfather started Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
Okay.
Wow.
And he told me a really cool story about when they were coming over from Europe on the boat. Kids were dying of, different ailments, and the kids that were sick would they'd get quarantined on a different part of the ship, so they didn't get everyone sick. And the kids that were sick, they would give ice cream because they weren't going to make it. So his grandfather was one of those people, or his great-grandfather was one of those people that wasn't going to make it, so he was given ice cream, and he fell in love with ice cream. And then when he got to America, he ended up living and ended up starting Haagen-Dazs.
That's a freaking cool story.
It was awesome. It was awesome talking to this guy. But we went our separate directions once we started hunting, and we were, I forget the species of sheep that I was supposed to hunt, but the species of sheep that I was supposed to hunt was out on the coast, and there's a lot of them, a lot of rams. And the outfitters were Irene and Sergey Rudakov, and they're awesome people. And they're like, hey, when you get out there, there's a lot of rams. Shoot one that you want, and then for X amount of dollars, we can get you a second tag, and you can shoot a second sheep. And I was like, awesome. I'll definitely shoot two if I have the opportunity. And but then I get on the hunt, and I meet this gentleman from Haagen-Dazs, and he had already had those species of sheep that lived on the ocean. So he's like, I don't have an coast snow sheep. So Irene's like, so Donnie, you're not going to go after that species that's on the ocean now. You're going to go after the coast snow sheep. I was like, okay. And so I was talking to him at dinner, the gentleman from Haagen-Dazs. I was talking to him, and I go, hey, so what am I looking for here? And he's like, oh, any ram. He's like, you see any ram of any age at all, even if it's a 3-year-old little sickle, he's like, you shoot it. He's like, this is my 4th time hunting on coast. He's like, I've never even seen one.
Ooh.
Wow.
So I went from potentially of shooting 2
Having the pick of the litter
to now I'm going to maybe not even get one.
Eesh.
So we go on this hunt, and me and Vasily, he's like 75 years old, and it was awesome. He wore wool pants, and he'd put on, he'd had this wool blanket, and he'd wrap it particularly around his foot, and then he'd put his foot in a knee-high rubber boot, kind of like a muck, but an old-style rubber boot. And he'd sit there and he'd play with it, and it wouldn't be right, and he'd redo it, and he'd finally get it right, and we'd go hiking, him and I. And he was awesome to hike with, because he'd go 100 yards, and then he'd turn around to where we had just come from, and he'd lean on a stick, and we'd just look at life.
Yeah.
And then we go another 100 yards, and so we did that. And so we hunted, and the first day we saw like a 4-year-old little sickle, and he's like, Batran, which means big ram. Batran, shoot. And I didn't want to shoot that ram, so I acted like I couldn't get my round into my chamber, and so it got away, and I was like, and he was super disappointed. And let me move back. So when we got into camp, and I love this, but Vasily's sitting there, and he's like, he's kept sucking on his teeth, and he'd say something to Misha. Yo, namana. And Misha's like, new rifle. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty new. And he's like, you shoot it? And I was like, yeah, I've shot it a lot. And he's like, you ever shoot it like here? And I was like, no. And he's like, we need to shoot it. Like, so even though I'm an American and speak almost no Russian, and I had a couple words, and they were Russian and spoke almost no English, they recognized that I was still an unpracticed hunter, showed up with an unproven rifle, and their lives and livelihood and my success, like, this is all going to lean on. So even though there's this language barrier, they're like, no, we're getting your rifle dialed for this.
Yep.
And like, so this is important, because I ended up shooting my gun, let's just say 5 times, and to where they felt like I could shoot it well. And so we did that. So I'm down 5 rounds now, and so then we hunt the whole time, and we never saw any other rams. Are we good on time?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. And we were seeing a lot of grizzly bears. And it was really funny too, because one day we kind of got weathered in, and I go, hey, I'm going to go for a hike. And they're like, no way. It's not safe. I'm like, hey, I'm fine around bears. Don't worry about me. It's like, no, it's not safe. It's not, you can't go. There's a creature here that will get you. And I was like, what creature? And
I hope it's Bigfoot.
No, so he's describing this creature, and then I was like, and we were next to this sand. I go, draw it. What does it look like? And so he ends up drawing a lynx. He ends up drawing the face of a cat and then tufts off its ear. And I'm like, a lynx? He's like, yeah. I'm like, we're good. It's okay. If I see a lynx, I'll come back to camp. Like, they were afraid, like, the lynx is going to get you. I was like, no. And they're like, the bears are okay, but the cats are mean. And so I was like, okay. So we ended up hunting. And on the last evening, the day before the last day, Sergey calls me on the satellite phone and he goes, Donnie, it's going to blizzard and it's going to blizzard bad. Like you're going to get like 10 feet of snow. Can you stay? Are you willing to stay through the snowstorm and then after the snowstorm? Because we really want you to get a sheep before you go home. And I was like, yeah, Sergey, like I'll stay. And he's like, okay, so big storm, you're going to be fine. Like we'll keep an eye on you, blah, blah, blah. And, so the sun is setting on our last day, or it's about to kind of set. And, Vasily and I are on the top of a mountain. We're just going around this mountain edge. And I happen to just look back over my shoulder at the mountain behind us. And I see what I'm like, think is a large grizzly bear coming around the mountain of the peak right behind us. And just before I'm going out of sight, I just grab my binos and I put them under my armpit and I look and it is a freaking giant ram. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, Vasily, patron. And I literally could tell you 10 stories from this hunt. And he picks his binos up, which are just these horrible like Tasco things. And he's like, it's okay. I'm like, we've seen 2 rams. The first one was a little sickle horn that he was upset that I didn't shoot. And now this thing is like a 40-inch twister.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, that's okay. I'm like, Vasily, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to leave you here. And I'm going to sprint down this mountain. I'm going to cross that river and I'm going to sprint up the other side. I'm going to go shoot this ram. I'll see you at another time.
I'll see you sometime, Vasily.
Yeah.
See ya.
So I take off. And he's kind of telling me, no. And I take off and I'm like, no, I'm doing this. And I take off and I cross the river and I go up the other side. I'll never forget this. I'm up the other side and I'm sneaking through these little dwarf pines and rocks. And I'm just sneaking through with my rifle. And all of a sudden I hear something and I drop the barrel of my gun and I spin around and it's Vasily.
He caught up to you?
Yes.
He's 75?
Not caught up to me. Like, I think went with me. Like, I don't think he was more than 200 yards behind me the whole time.
Yeah.
And I'm in hiking boots, and I'm like 25 years old. He's 75 wearing knee-high rubber boots. And I'm like, Vasily, how did you do that? And he sounds like, I hate to sound like Indiana Jones, but when he would move, like he had stoves and, because we would stop like,
jingling,
we'd stop like twice an hour for tea. So he's got teacups and like ching, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. So we end up going down and, the ram beds down at 500 yards. I have no business shooting 500 yards. Do you guys want the whole story of me?
Oh, yeah.
So I go, Vasily, I can't shoot this far. And he's like, shoot. I'm like, I can't shoot 500 yards. Like, I don't know how to shoot a gun 500 yards. He's like, shoot. I'm like, buddy, I don't even know. So I'm like, okay. Like, he wouldn't let me get any closer. He's like, you need to shoot now. The sun's going down. Like, it's right now.
No. Yep.
So I take my rifle and I set it on a camera tripod, so it's kind of slippery and it's not. And I'm like, ah. So I just settle down and I put the crosshairs on the top of the ram's back, and then I put the crosshairs like
Just a little bit more,
like 10 feet above the ram's back or whatever.
Kentucky windage.
Yeah.
Literally guessing. And I'm just holding that. I see the ram's back and I see my flat crosshair. I'm like, okay, I'm whatever, 20 feet above the ram, 10 feet above the ram, whatever. And I'm just like, boom. And I shoot and he's looking and my bullet, I can see my bullet. I can see the vapor trail.
Yep.
It goes all the way down and it's like, I'm going to smash him. Like it's going to be a perfect shot. And all of a sudden it goes down and it hits like a foot under him. It hits like a foot or 2 feet or 3 feet right in front of his body.
Yeah.
So if I would have went up just a little bit more, I would have smoked him. But
yeah.
so rocks explode and the ram stands up and he's looking all around. He doesn't know what's going on and he turns and he faces us. So I'm like, okay, that was this high. So he hasn't moved. He's just now standing. So now I have the crosshairs like on his forehead and I just go straight up above his body. And then I'm just like,
Right there.
Boom. And again, I see my bullet, and it comes down, goes right underneath his nose, right underneath his chest, and hits him in the top left foot through his hoof.
Right.
Like right through his hoof. And I see the ram, he lifts his foot up, and now he's like, he's hopping on one foot and
has no idea.
He's looking around. He still hasn't taken a step. He's just
Right.
holding his foot up, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And then he turns, and there's a bunch of pine trees right there, and he just goes over the cliff. And I just grabbed my rifle, and I only had like 4 more rounds or something like that, 3 more rounds. So I just boil off down this hill, and I'm like, Vasily, I'll see you at the bottom. So I go down there. And it was a big ravine, and I get set up to where I think the ram is somewhere in here, and I'm just glassing. And lo and behold, I just see the ram. This is going to be really embarrassing for me, but it is the truth. The ram just starts coming up this trail, and he's coming right to me. Like this ram is going to walk past me at like 25 yards.
Oh, wow, man.
And he has no idea I'm there, and he's just, he's limping, and he's looking around. He's just limping. And so I have a round in my chamber, and I'm sitting there, and he's walking out, and he's just about to clear this tree, and I'm going to have like a 75-yard shot at his chest. And all of a sudden he whips his head and looks basically what I think is right at me. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I'm not moving at all. And so I just slowly turn my head around, and I see Vasily, he wears like this Batman raincoat. And he's just up there looking over the whole valley, and he just looks like a little 5'5" Eskimo man with this Batman raincoat, and he's just looking all around. And I'm like, oh no. And the ram is staring at him, and I'm being a selfish hunter right now. All I can see is the ram's guts. That's it. And I'm just like, I'm in Russia. I've already got a round in this ram. And I just put my crosshairs as close to his rib cage as I can.
Yep.
It's right where the diaphragm is. Yep. And I'm just like, boom. I shoot him right through the guts. And he humps up and he boils off this thing. And I turn around to kind of like scold Vasily. And I turn around and he's gone. He's
vanished.
He's gone. And so I put another round in my chamber, and I'm just like looking at this whole area. And I'm like, okay, so now he's got one in his foot, and now he's dead. Now he's gonna die for sure. He's dead. Now we're in that process. But it's gonna snow like 10 feet tonight, right? Or over the next few days. And so Vasily would carry an AK-47 everywhere. And so I'm sitting there glassing my ram, and all of a sudden something catches my movement. My movement catches my eye. And the sun was setting to the west, so that really gorgeous warm light is just cascading. Right. You know, when you're glassing for deer or whatever, and you get that warm light that's cascading across the landscape, and you're like, there's a buck, there's a buck, there's a buck.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the light that's coming across. So I see this, and I look, and there's my ram. He's humped up, and he's just walking really slow, and he's walking up this rock trail. Right as I'm watching him, he goes like 10 feet, and all of a sudden, and the ramp just like tips over. And I look, and I see Vasily sitting there with his AK, and I'm young and dumb and furious. So I'm like, he just killed my ram. Yeah. I wasn't even thinking about the ram suffering as being a complete jerk, complete absent-minded, trophy hunting, gross. I was just being gross. And so I storm over there, and I couldn't be mad for very long because I'm coming up the hill. I'm twice Vasily's size, and he's like, he's got his AK, and he's like, wait. He's like, hold on. And a stewardess on our airplane gave me a whodunit novel when I was on the airplane, and she's walking. It's so funny. She's walking down the aisle of the airplane, speaking Russian to everyone, and then she's like, "American?" I was like, "What? Like, do we look that dumb?"
Yeah, that's funny.
You know. And she's like, "American," and then she ended up talking. She was a Russian girl, but she ended up talking to me over the flight, and she's like, "Hey, I have some books in English up here. Do you want one?" And I was like, I told her I was sheep hunting. I was like, "Yeah, sure." She gave me one. So when we would be back in camp, I'd read this whodunit to them at night, but they don't speak English, so I'd have to act out the scene. I was like, so the girl you know, she's going to the gym, and they're like, oh, gym. It's like she meets a man. Okay. And like, I'm like, they go out to have dinner, and they're like, oh, you know, so I'm acting everything out. So we've been doing this for 2 weeks. So I've been acting this book out. So when I start going up to Vasily, he's like, wait. He's like, the ram was so sick. Like he's like, you killed him. I just helped. You know, he's like, he's trying to sell me as
right.
You're the great hunter. You did this. I just helped. And I'm like, I couldn't, he just looked so charming telling his story. And so I was like, okay, we got the ram. And I was really impressed. Like he shot an unbelievable group with an AK.
How far was he? Like, so you looked up, he was gone.
What
did he do? Just like
he knew where the ram. Like he's grew up. They trap sables, which is like a little guinea pig kind of thing there.
Yeah.
And so he's lived in these areas, these mountains. He lived in these. We were on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Like he's like, when, you know, he probably shot rams in the guts before, and he's like, when it's going to go, it's going to use its main trail.
Right.
It's like, if it's not going to bed down here, it's going to leave here. And so he ran to the main exit of the trail, and then here comes the ram, and he just mowed it down.
Right. That's insane.
And so
dude was Batman.
Yeah, right.
He was really good. And he, this was so funny too. This was kind of scary. We climbed a frozen waterfall. This is earlier in the hunt, and we're going up this frozen waterfall, and I had a bad cold, and Vasily and I had been fighting, which is really hard to do when you don't speak each other's language. And so I kept going with my nose, and we're going up this cliff, and I go, and he turned around, and he goes, he smacked me super hard. I mean, like, made my head whip, and I turned back around and was like, instantly I just want to grab him and throw his body off this cliff. And he smacks my face super hard, and I look at him, and he goes, shh. Like, you're sniffling too loud. Like, the sheep are going to hear you. You're sniffling way too loud. And I was like,
that's funny.
So when he went, shh, I was like, I want to kill you right now. But that is really, really funny. And we would argue in the tent because I'll tell you one more thing quick.
Go ahead.
So I'm coughing, sneezing. I'm in the tent. So I'm laying on my sheepskin, and he comes over to me, not a word spoken, and he straddles me in my midsection, as though a woman may.
Yeah, right.
And
give you a lap dance.
He grabs a glass jar that is filled with vodka and grizzly bear gallbladder bile.
Oh,
and so
delicious.
He shoves my shirt up, and then without saying a word, and he just
smeared it on
all on my chest because he's trying to break up like my chest cold. And so he just did this out of, like, I wish we could have filmed this because it just would have been so
I would love
awesome.
to see in your face.
Like what the?
And I was laying back like this, and I was coughing and stuff, and I'd cough, and then I was just laying back, and he just crawled over and right on top of me, and I just sat there. I was like,
what the?
I never even moved my hands. I was like, where is this going? What are we doing now? And then
all of a sudden you're in Brokeback Mountain.
Oh, that's gross. So then he made me drink this huge thing of vodka, but that's the kind of relationship we had all week. And then the next morning we were fighting. He's like, I'm going to go find the sheep. I'll come get you. And I was like, no, I'm hiking too. And he's like, no, you're too sick to hike. I'm like, no, I'm hiking too. So we fought about that, and finally I won, and we went together. But that was the day he slapped me and he told me to shush. But so we get our ram down. We break him down, and this is a true story. I'm not bragging. This has happened twice in my life. But him and Misha got so lost, and they had lost a guide in the previous weeks to exposure. He'd passed away on a hunt, and the two guides had gotten so lost. And I was like, you guys, I know where camp is. And they're like, no. I'm like, listen, I've been paying it because I didn't speak Russian. Like, I've been paying attention to how we're going.
Right.
I've been memorizing where we're going. Yep. And I'm like, I know how to get back to camp. And so I ended up convincing them both to follow me, and I led right back to camp. And I earned a lot of street credit from Vasily.
Wow.
He was really, really impressed that I knew how to get us back to camp. But when we walked in, I went up this frozen river, and I was like, we're going to go over this valley, 2 valleys. The third valley is going to dish out, and our camp's going to be right there. And we went over the third valley, and he's just like, oh, man. He's like,
you did it.
Yeah, he's really impressed. So, so then when I'm leaving Russia, I go to the first airport, and I have a bolt-action rifle.
Yep.
And let's just say I had 30 rounds left. Okay.
Right.
It was actually, I think I ended up shooting, it doesn't matter. Let's just say I shot 5 rounds. I have 35 rounds left. And the guy opens my bolt, looks at my rifle, opens my rounds. He's like, you have 34. And I was like, no, I have 35. He's like, no, you have 34. And he's like, where's the last one? And I go, I have no idea. He's like, okay. He's like, not that big a deal. We're in like this little, whatever airport. Still everyone has a machine gun, but not that big a deal. And so he takes the 35 and he puts a line through it and he writes 34 and then he signs his name onto my visa or whatever, my document.
Just amended it.
My declaration.
Yep.
So we go from that airport to another airport to another airport to another airport. It's fine. So now I'm in Moscow and I have to go through 3 security checkpoints to get onto my flight to fly back to the States.
This is an international airport.
International airport.
Yeah.
I go through the first one, no problem. Go through the second one, no problem. Go through the third one. Now, like I'm in the final. This is like the security checkpoint that you go through to where like they're making sure you're not getting on this airplane with a bomb or a gun.
Right.
Like this is the checkpoint. Like the
Scan
airplane
and
is right there.
Yeah.
Like everything
You
you have
can
on
see
your
the
person.
plane.
I can see the airplanes right out the window.
Yeah.
747 is parked right there, and I have the bag right downstairs. I can show you guys. I wish I would have brought it up here to show you, but it's a Mountain Smith lumbar pack. Do you know what those are? Do you guys remember what those are? They're,
Yep, like a big fishing pack almost.
yeah, kind of. Yep.
Yeah.
And mine is bright blue and yellow, and then it has 2 water bottle pockets on either side that are black mesh, and so they run that bag through it, and I'm sitting there, and they run it through, and the guy's like, just a minute. I was like, yeah, no problem. And he runs it through again. He's like, just a minute. I said, yeah, no problem. Runs it through again. And then he's like, come here. And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? He's like, we have a problem. And I was like, we do? And he's like, yeah. He's like, there's a rifle cartridge in your bag that you're trying to take onto this airplane. And I was like, is there? And he goes, yeah, there is. And I go, and it hits me. I was like, there's the 35th cartridge.
Yeah.
That's it. And I go, where is it? And he goes, we don't know. We don't know where it is. He goes, come look. And so I look and I go, oh. I go, it's in the drink. It's in the
Cup holder.
I go, look. And what had happened was I had dropped a cartridge on the hunt. Vasily had picked it up, or Misha, and
Stuck it in your...
put it in there and zipped. You know, it has like a yellow bungee cord with one of those stoppers.
Right.
Zipped it shut. So the cartridge just in there floating around. Well, I went through all these other domestic airports that really didn't care
Didn't find
that had
it,
a rifle cartridge. Like, you're not taking down a Russian airplane in Russia full of Russians. Nobody cares enough.
Right.
And so I was like, oh my God. I was like, look. So I take my paperwork out. I'm thinking he's going to be like, oh, okay. Put it back into my, shells and then stamp it. And like, I'm like, look, see, we were missing one. That guy crossed it out, wrote 34 and signed it. He's like, yeah, I see that. So he's basically like, here's what's going to happen. He's like, you're going to go home to the United States. He's like, this is the first thing he said. You're going home. However, you're going to a Russian prison now for probably 3 to 4 weeks while we sort this out. You're going to be in a Moscow prison, and you're not getting on this flight. Like, you're definitely not getting on this flight. You can kiss this flight goodbye. But you're going to lose the money from this flight. When you get out of Russian prison in a couple of weeks, you're going to have to book another flight that you're going to have to pay for out of your own money. So 3 weeks to 4 weeks in a Russian prison, a new airline ticket, which is, let's just say $1,500. Mm-hmm. And then we're adding you to an international terrorist watch list. Jeez. And he's like, we know you're not a terrorist. The guy was very honest with me. He's like, we know you're not a terrorist, but when this happens, you have to be put on a watch list.
Which would prevent you probably from flying anywhere
yeah,
else, right?
or I'd get harassed or whatever. So I was just like I could feel the warmth in my face.
Right.
It's just like
adrenaline's going up.
Okay.
You're like,
I was like, okay, so this is what's happening. He's like, that's what's going to happen. I'm like, how do I prevent this from happening? And he's like, this
done deal.
These steps are already in. So I'm starting to think, what is a Moscow prison going to be like? Mm-hmm. And once I'm in there, who is looking out for my best interest of getting out in 3 to 4 weeks?
Right.
Who's making the phone calls? Who's doing this stuff? So that gentleman hands me off to an MP, what I'm guessing is an MP.
Right.
He's dressed militarily. He has stuff going on, awards.
Yeah.
And
Ribbons.
he was not a nice man.
Right.
So he hands me off to him. He's like, come with me. And so we walk down this hallway. It's just like a movie. Like lights are flicking.
Yeah.
And it's white walls, white ceiling, white floor, and no personnel whatsoever. And we're walking down, and we walked, 50 yards down this hallway, and we go into this room, and it's an interrogation room. And he's like, he's swearing. I won't swear, but he's swearing at me in English. And he's like, you American. He's like, you're so stupid. And he's just talking to me, and I'm just listening to him. He's like, you're going to prison. And he's like, and he's telling me how bad it's going to be. And truth be told, I was literally sitting there staring at him, and he's probably 155, 160 pounds. And I was like,
You're starting to size them up. Yeah.
I'm like, my first thought was,
Well, you're seeing your life.
yes.
You're seeing your life just like you're hopeless again.
Yes.
Right.
You're hopeless.
So my first thought
No
was,
control. Yeah.
can I punch him hard enough with one punch, or maybe two? Can I knock him out long enough that I can walk down the hallway? Because the airplane's right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, walk down the hallway. I don't care if I lose my bags, my rifle. I don't care. But can I punch him hard enough to get on the airplane
And take off
and then take off?
without him waking up and
Yep.
finding out.
And then I was worried that, like, if I punch him and then he wakes up, then is he running down the hallway and going to drag me off the airplane? Now I've assaulted
Right.
military. So now I'm thinking, should I kill him?
Right.
And I'm literally thinking, should I punch him as hard as I can? And then I'm not trained at all. So I'm like, I feel as though I could probably knock him down and choke him to death. And then there was a desk right there. I was like, I'd pull his body into like the little area where you put your feet and
Scenarios.
ball him up. And there wouldn't be any blood other than like from his face, but I could ball him up to where if somebody even looks in the little glass window,
They would think you'd
like,
just
oh,
be
nobody's in there.
Yeah.
And then I get on the airplane, hopefully it would take off, and then
You'd be already on your way home to the
yeah.
yeah.
So I'm just thinking about, and he's berating me, and I was wiping my face. I was like feeling a little bit of stress, and I was wiping my face.
A little bit of stress.
And then I dropped my hands down, and I felt a wad of cash. Wad of cash that I had brought.
Right. You were probably at that point. Like you're wiping your face, and as
You were
soon as you
thinking
drop
about
your
it.
hands,
Yeah,
like,
I don't know if I was like,
you were like right there.
I don't know if I would have done it, but I was like, what? Like, my mind was, if I go into prison, is that like if I'm in prison
Your life's over.
and not
Right.
getting out, would I've killed him then?
Right.
And the answer is 100% yes.
Right. Yeah.
Like if I'm sitting in prison and I'm not going to get out of a Moscow prison, would I kill the guy now?
Yeah.
The answer is 100%.
Right.
So why don't I kill him before I go to prison?
Yeah.
And then
Shoot your shot.
shoot my shot and see how this is going to fall.
Yep.
And
Well, it's like fight or flight, basically. You know.
that's where I was. Like I was, the options were starting to, in my
Narrow
mind,
down.
whether it was real or not, the doors
Right.
were closing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dropped my hands down on my thigh and I feel the cash. And I was like, I pulled it up and it was all 100s.
Yeah.
And I pulled it up and I go, and I just had it above my pocket and I go, is there any way I'm getting on this flight? And he's staring at the money. And he said, how much is that? And I said, I don't know. It's like $3,000. And he's like, you're not getting on this flight. He's like, that's nowhere near enough. You're not getting on this flight. You're going to prison. And I'm trying to bargain with him. And now he's trying to, and I'm nervous to say it because now I feel like he's trying to pinch me for bribery. Because he's like, what exactly are you offering me?
Right. Right.
And I was like, well, I'm not offering you anything. I'm just saying, is there any way? And I'm just like tapping the money. I'm like, is there any way I'm getting on this flight? And lo and behold, there was a window in the door, and then there was a window, which I can only imagine is like when they're talking to different people or whatever. And through that window, I could see another window, which I could see into the hallway. And I saw a guy coming down the hallway with a lot of accolades on his uniform. Clearly, probably this guy's boss or at least chain of command. Yeah. And I see him, and I look back at the other guy, and I see him instantly nervous. He's getting nervous that this guy's coming down the hallway. And I'm sitting there holding it, and he goes, "Give it to me." And I go, "I'm not giving it to you unless I'm getting on that plane." And, like, I didn't want to threaten him, but I was like, if I give you this and you double-cross me, like, we're now going to have something to talk about for sure. Like, this is going to be a one-way street. So he's like, give it to me. And I hand it to him, and he looks at it, and he goes, "You stupid American." And he's like, "Get out of my face." And I'm like, "I can leave this room?" He's like, "Get out of my face." Or he said, "Get out." And the guy's walking down the hallway, and I just walked out the door. And as I'm I just literally just like walked down the hallway and like got to the security guard, and he handed me my passport. And I got to the security, and I'm like, passport and ticket, and like got on the airplane, and I'm just sitting in my seat and staring at the monitor in front of me, and I have it on flight tracker.
Waiting to leave.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting there staring at a picture of Russia. When I was leaving, I turned over my shoulder, and I saw the higher-ranked individual talking to the younger guy, and like it sounded like he was yelling at him, but they talk super aggressively anyway, so I don't know if he was just talking with him, but it sounded like he was being very aggressive. And then the door shut on the airplane, and I was like, that's one more step. And we backed up, and then the airplane took off, and I was like, but I literally stared, sweating bullets, stared at the internet. I was just waiting for, I've maybe seen too many movies. I'm literally waiting for Russian MiGs to like parallel the airplane and like.
What is that? What's that movie? Is it Argo or something like that?
Oh, yeah, Argo.
Yeah, with Ben Affleck, where they're flying, and it's like, okay, we're out of their territory. Is that what you were waiting for?
Yeah, and so I was just literally watching our airplane, like international dateline. It was like, doo, doo, doo. And, I made it and got here, and, like, my bags were on the airplane, but I was just like.
That's insane.
It is insane.
I don't know what would have happened, but I was, I was like.
Well, we just talked about before we started this day, the guy that just had that happen with a shotgun shell or rifle shell got 12 years in prison or something?
Well, he's looking at 12 years. I mean, it still hasn't gone through. I want to say I don't think it was Mexico. I think
he's an American.
Yeah, from Texas. I want to say it was from Texas, and I don't know. It was like maybe one of the Caribbean islands or something like that. That wasn't like United States friendly.
And they're not. And these places aren't gun friendly, right? No one like. We have people that have guns. Our police have guns. Our sportsmen have guns.
None of their citizens, right?
None of them have guns. So when they see a round, it's a major red flag.
Right.
And like when I was going, like I don't know if any of the other metal detectors had found the round in the domestic airports, but they didn't care.
And that's what happens when you give up your right to the Second Amendment.
But the best part about this is like you told this story to us on like Memorial Day last year at this really nice restaurant in Stillwater. Just randomly, we ordered a nice meal, and then you're like, by the way, this one time I was in Russia, and you tell us the story. And on the way out here, you're like, oh, we doing podcast, boys? Like, yeah, if you'll have us, obviously, anytime I can get the silky smooth vocals of Donnie Vincent. Which I imagine you blushed and shook your head just like you did right now.
That's funny.
And you're like, oh, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, dude, I would love for you to tell the story of Russia and getting out of there, where you had that incident, and you're like, oh, yeah, we should. I contemplated killing a man. Absolutely. I mean, but to be at that, and that's why I wanted to do, like, your scariest and most dangerous hunts. I mean, there's definitely, the Winds of Adak, that film. I mean, being on those seas, that would be scary as hell. Thinking you're going to lose your life, you're out of your control. And again, when you're in Russia, you're sitting across from this guy who just hates you because you're an American.
Yeah, right? He has nothing to lose.
Clearly an honest mistake that was easily explainable.
Yeah.
But they don't care.
Doesn't care.
No.
They're going to be out to get
super corrupt.
One of us. Like, right.
Super corrupt, tossing them money. And I mean, I can't say I would think any differently than you did in that situation.
Oh, it was gnarly.
When was this? You said you were 25. So
was this like... I don't even know if I was 25. It was 2008 or 9, somewhere right in there.
Okay, so, yeah.
I would have graduated the police academy at that time. Yep,
something
2009.
Like that. Yeah.
Wow. That's just a crazy story.
So it was gnarly.
I mean, I'd have done the same exact thing. You know,
Yeah.
you're playing that game in your mind exactly like what's going to happen and unfold.
I don't
and
know.
all the different avenues that
Yeah. Could
it's
happen.
wild. Yeah.
I hope you, when you got home, you thanked your friend that told you to take that cash.
Oh yeah. And then even just, I was so thankful of everything after that, and I would go back to Russia now, but I just understood like, okay, like you really have to figure everything out. Yeah.
Playing out worst case scenario.
Did you call Dennis Campbell back and say, "Hey, you owe me $3,000"?
No, it was the best. It was the
Did
best
he hear
money
the
I'd
story?
Ever spent. No, I don't even know if he's ever heard the story. And I've never really told it publicly, other than, it's weird when you tell people that you're.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I would have, but it's hard to say, because when you say something like that, it comes across like you're being a tough guy, and I wasn't being a tough guy, because I was literally like, even though he's 160 pounds, I don't even know if I can do this, but this might be might be him or me.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's a thing that's taught in law enforcement. That's a thing that's taught to us in the academy. When you have somebody cornered like that, even us, anybody, any human,
When they have that moment of I'm going to jail,
it's fight or flight.
this is it. That's when that moment. That's why when they teach us, and I think this is what Jared's alluding to, when you decide that this person has committed a crime that they should be placed under arrest, you get them in handcuffs immediately.
Yeah.
Because things go bad quick.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before they realize it.
Right.
Well, once they do, you have a certain amount of time to just take control right away.
Yeah.
Because the more time that they have to do the exact thing that you were doing, which everybody is going to do, they're playing that scenario out of how they can get out of that situation, like a raccoon that's turned up into a corner.
Stupid raccoons. I hate raccoons.
And then the only other thing that I can think about, I think I might have told you guys this, but I almost died in Alaska from hypothermia one time on a sheep hunt. But those are,
I love. He throws that in there. Like,
Yeah, but by the way,
I almost died of hypothermia.
Yeah.
You didn't tell us that.
was that did the tent fall apart? That
no, but we've had that happen. No, it was just a friend of mine, Frank Harris, and we were sheep hunting in the Chugach, and it was his tag. He had killed a big ram, and it was gorgeous, 65 degrees, sunny, stunning, and we killed this big ram. We were so proud of ourselves, and we'd killed it late in the afternoon, way, way up on this mountain, and we killed him at 4:30. It took us till like 3 a.m. to get back to the tent. It's actually funny. We fell asleep. We're wearing our backpacks. We fell asleep in an absolute downpour rain like this.
Oh.
And we could see the tent. It was like 70 yards away. We could see the reflective light in our headlamps. And we were just about to stand up and get going. And then all of a sudden I opened my eyes and it's daylight. And I was like, holy cow. And I looked over and Frank's just sound asleep. And I go, hey. He's like, And we're soaked. I'm like, we fell asleep in the rain. He's like, we could see the tent. And I was like, and we slept like 4 hours like that with our backpacks on, just sound asleep next to a raging little stream. And we got to the tent, we packed everything up, and we decided that we were going to hike out. We were just gonna. We were both biologists for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We had 14 days off, and we killed the ram on the first day. So we're like, let's slow play this before we go back to work. So let's take today, and we'll hike the ram's meat, cape, and horns all the way out. We'll bring him the meat cutter, we'll bring him the taxidermist, and then we'll go have pizza and beer. And then tomorrow we'll take our time and we'll hike all the way back in. It was like 16 miles or something like that, 17 miles to the tent. And then we'll pack the tent up, everything like that. And then we'll sleep over, and then, we'll pack everything up the next night, and then we'll slowly walk out.
Yeah.
And we got back to we did everything that I just told you. We even found money. I found money twice in the wilderness.
No way.
I found $20 blown across the tundra on our way out, and I picked it up. I was like, Frank, we got pizza money.
Wow.
And then 2 years ago, when I was hunting moose in Maine, I found $100 in the middle of the bush, like just sitting there on the ground.
That's amazing.
And there's a little kid with us. I gave it to him. It was really fun. But so Frank and I, we hiked out, got pizza, got beer, and then the next day we go to the trailhead and we're getting our gear on, and there's 2 sheep hunters coming out, and they're like, where are you guys going? And we said Ship Creek Pass, and they're like, no, you're not going there right now. It's like, yeah, we're going there. It's like, there's a blizzard there right now. We can see it. Like, we're like, looks good. It's like, no, man, it's like blowing 80 up there right now. It's like raining, sleeting, snowing. Like, you can't. And we didn't even have rain gear. We left our rain gear and everything in
So you're
camp.
soaked.
Yeah, we're dry getting started, right?
Yeah.
I had North Face. North Face used to make these really light pants like that called Tech Wear, and I was wearing those, and Patagonia, like blue, like that waffle, like R3 fleece. I had that on, a stocking cap. Frank had freaking cotton army fatigues and like he had this real tree fleece that he used to wear that was like hot pink because the color had went out of it. And sometimes real tree would turn pink back in the day.
Yep.
So this stupid fleece that he had looked pink. And so these sheep hunters were like, you guys can't go there. And we're like, okay, well, whatever. And, we're tough guys. And so they leave and he's like, we're going, right? I'm like, yeah, we're going. And so we hiked all the way in, and I don't know how far away we were, but we got up into this mountain pass and it started raining. And we're instantly soaked, right? When you're in the rain, like it's not an hour. It's within 5 minutes you're soaked. Yeah. And we were soaked, and he's like, how you feeling? I'm like, I'm fine, dude. We're wet, but who cares? And then we hiked in, a couple more miles, and he's like, how you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm getting cold, but I'm fine, and then a couple more miles, and he's like, now you're starting to be in the middle, right? And it's like you're in every step we're going higher, and the wind's blowing, and now the rain is now snow and rain, and like now we're starting to shiver, and then it got to where we went from shivering to within like a mile, I couldn't feel my legs. Like when I'm looking down, taking steps, I'm like, I can't feel any of this. Like I remember I could feel my testicles. I couldn't feel my penis. I could feel water running off the bottom of my testicles, and I couldn't feel my legs at all.
Right.
And I go, Frank, all I can feel is my testicles. And he's like, I can't feel my testicles. I was like, all right, dude, like, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, now we're damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Right.
So we just kept going. And then he's like, I'm like, dude, I don't know if we can make it. And there's a big boulder in front of us, like 50 yards away. And he's like, can you make it to that rock? I was like, yeah, I can make it to that rock. And he's like, well, let's just go to that rock. So we went to that rock, and then we did that.
Can you make it to that tree?
The whole way. Yep. Can you make it to that? Can we make it to that ridge? Yeah, we can make that ridge. And like, we just trick ourselves, and we got all the way in there. And sometimes people ask me if I've ever seen a wolverine, like in the wilderness. And this was like my 13th trip to Alaska, something like that. And we get down to the tent where now we can barely function. Like everything's shaking, like we can barely walk. And I see a wolverine's right next to our tent. It's the first wolverine I've ever seen in my life. And I go, hey, we couldn't even speak. And I go, hey, Frank, there, a wolverine. And he's sitting there, and he got a rifle, and he goes, oh, cool. I shoot it. Too cool. And so we get in Frank's massive, giant, huge, colossal homophobe. Like one,
I didn't know where he was going. I thought he was going to say a massive man.
Yeah, right.
No, he's a massive man. But one time I sent him as a joke when we were working as biologists. I mailed him. There's a professional motocross racer from Minnesota named Ryan Dungey, and he did an ad for Fox Racing years ago where he's naked. It's a magazine ad. He's naked sitting on like a toolbox, and he's like this, and he's super fit guy, but he's totally naked, and he's just wearing boots.
Right.
And he's like this. And so I know Frank hates that stuff, so I cut it out of the magazine and I put it in the mail, in the Eskimo mail, and I mailed it to him. And he was pissed.
That's funny.
He was pissed. So anyway, so we get in the tent. I'm like, hey, like we gotta cuddle a little bit, And he's like,
we gotta cuddle a little.
He's like totally against it. But we got in there, we stripped down, we got in our sleep bags, and our sleep bags are just shaking.
Yeah.
And we didn't like spoon or anything, but we got like as close as possible. And we shivered all night. And it took us a long time to stop shivering. And then the next morning we got up and, got our stuff together and hiked out, and it was fine. But
to touch on that real quick, while you're in the sleeping bag, did you see, just to go off of some of the tests that Sitka did, I know Barclow and some of those guys, and with the sleeping bag.
Is it John?
Yeah, John Barclow. Yeah. I think it was those guys that did the test of if when you get wet, you keep moving and stuff. But some of what they were saying was you keep your clothes on, even in the sleeping bag.
That's
They're
right.
Trying to
we always do that.
Yeah, to dry out.
Yep.
Like you never want to take them off because.
No. And so you get in soaked.
Yeah.
And like I used a bag this last year. Do you guys know what a Wiggies is? It's a synthetic. It's a lamellite. insulated bag, so it's a synthetic sleeping bag. So it packs. It's heavy,
Right. Yeah.
and it doesn't pack nearly as small as a down. But down bags, like,
They hold the water and
they
stuff.
can be really
It's
dangerous.
bad,
Yeah. I've got caught with a few down bags, and
Yep.
but the Wiggies bag last year, Forrest and I were on the peninsula and we were hunting this bull.
I think you can see it in the video actually.
Yeah, this bull, and we got soaked. Not dangerous, or we were fine, but we got soaked in a driving rain, and we got back to the tent. And just like you said, I take my rain gear off, shake it off, and put it in the vestibule because your rain gear is whatever. But I just got my sleeping bag soaked, like soaked. And the next morning I woke up, and basically on my chest in the Wiggies, like there was a puddle. And that was all the moisture that was getting wicked out. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Now, I wasn't dry in the morning, but I was 80% dry.
Warm and
And I was warm.
drying up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the next day, you start to tend more towards dry. And I've done, like Forrest and I have been on a moose hunt 2 years ago where it rained. I think it rained like 13 or 14, 15 days straight. We were soaked.
Was that Maine?
No, that was, we had one in Maine too, but we were in Alaska and it rained. I mean, it rained on us dark to dark, 15 days straight. There was a monsoon that hit.
That came through.
Dude, it was
brutal.
You're getting up in the morning and putting soaking wet socks on, soaking wet long underwear, soaking wet pants. And
Did anything turn as purple as my hands the other day?
no, probably. I didn't see them.
You
but
didn't get to witness that. I can attest. So yesterday morning, and we're going to do another podcast, I hope, tomorrow with TJ, who's our turkey guide. He actually, I just texted me here, and he's like, "Hey guys, how's the podcast going?" He had to attend to other things tonight. So we're going to do a podcast with TJ, but me, Jared, TJ, and Forrest, who I've grown to love Forrest. I love trying to take pictures of him while he's taking pictures of people in precarious positions, and I sent Donnie some photos that he can use at the office.
Yeah.
I told Forrest, by the way.
You
He's
did.
like, "Oh, man." Anyhow, it poured yesterday morning, and it's pouring right now here, but it absolutely poured. That I mean, the only time I've been that wet is every day when I get a shower. And it was just, we were soaked. And I looked over at Jared, and he's like this. And I'm like, I had a moment where I had my legs laid flat because he was the main hunter, and I lifted my legs up, and all the water just drained down and hit me in the testicles.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about cold? It was, it was like getting hit with an electric, shock. But we finally, the rain stopped, the turkeys didn't come, and we start walking out, and Jared's like, "Man, my hands," and he showed me, and they were purple, man. And then, I mean, they were purple, like they were bad. And what did you say he possibly has? You tried diagnosing
Raynaud's
disease.
Yeah.
You need to WebMD that.
I got
We'll end up down a hole. You'll have all kinds of things wrong with you.
Yeah.
It's probably because of the vaccine.
I have HIV. Yeah.
Probably because of the vaccine. We got a little more time.
Give it to me.
If you're good.
Yeah.
So, and we're going to cover the turkey hunting stuff tomorrow with TJ.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dive too much into it.
And if the weather's bad, we'll do it in here, right? If it's too bad outside.
Yeah, if it's too windy or something,
whatever.
we can come here
We'll do it
because it's calling for high winds. But we have to kill a turkey for Lee tomorrow. But I did something on this trip that I do actually pretty often. But our first morning, the gun that I was holding, it went off. And there was a turkey there.
Triggers are like that.
I don't know how it went off.
It happens. Yeah.
It wasn't me.
Yeah.
Actually, it was me. I missed. Earl.
Yeah, we named the bird Earl.
And I want to tell that story when TJ's here because he was riding me pretty hard about it.
Was he?
Well, in his defense,
It was a good 8 hours that day.
just 8 hours. I made fun of him about some things, and then he came at me about missing Earl, and it was all good ribbing, guys guys do. But I missed, and one thing that I've always loved I talk about the genuineness or the authenticity of your films, your videos, and not to go down the road of like terrible things, but things that you might not want to think about.
Yeah.
I want to talk about misses because you watch today's hunting shows, it's probably edited out or not talked about, and that's misses. Misses happen.
You just never even make it to the air. Yeah. Right.
Misses happen in hunting. And like I appreciate the Reverse Divide with Steve. you missed him at like, what was that, 11 yards, 17 yards, something like that.
Yeah, maybe not even. Yeah, I mean, no more than 11, 12 yards.
And then he runs out and you hammer him at like 30 something.
Yes, 35, I think.
And good shot, just hit him in the wrong place. And
yeah,
it just, he was kind of quartered towards you there.
He was,
right.
Yep.
He runs away. There's another film, you're hunting caribou. I can't really.
In Terra Nova.
Yes, Terra Nova. I think you shot under a caribou.
I shot over, and there was another miss on that trip that we didn't show, just because we weren't hiding it, but it just didn't work with the things that we were doing. And
story.
And that miss was, it's just kind of it wasn't a pretty miss, and it was a weird miss. It was just a weird thing where I kind of was adjusting to take a shot, and I was standing up over a bush, and basically I was not paying enough attention on the trigger, and my bow went off. And so like the caribou was over here and my arrow goes like this. Mm-hmm. So it was a miss, but not a pretty miss.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other side, there's one that I've seen you defend that with, and I know you took that to heart pretty hard, and that was with, is that a brown bear?
Yep.
Brown bear.
Right there.
Yeah. At like
steps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
steps.
Super. That's not one of your scariest hunts. If I'm within 7 steps of a brown bear, but you probably felt comforted by the guy that you were with, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And like, I was comforted with the fact that there's 3 of us. So if a grizzly bear attacks, I'm doing the math, just like when I was talking about on ADAC, I couldn't do the math because it wasn't adding up. But with the bear, okay, so if he attacks, there's 3 of us.
You were the fastest.
So as long as the other 2 guys aren't cowards, like we're gonna fight this bear off, right? Like we're gonna get scratched, and we're gonna get bit, and we're gonna get beat up, but we're gonna fight this bear off. Yeah. And then I had broadheads on arrows, and Lance had a 338 Win Mag, and weirdly enough, this was like the 12th day of that hunt, and this was the first day that we had rounds that actually worked in that rifle. And so we had hunted the first 12 days with no gun at all.
Oh, wow.
And so this was the first day that we hunted with an
Things would have got scrappy.
Weapon. Yeah.
I mean, if you guys haven't seen the other side, that's an incredible film of several bear hunts that you did.
Yeah.
And there's a bear at just steps, and there's like, it's like a bush, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's an alder bush.
And you hit a limb, and it just right below him.
My housing on my sight was clear, but my arrow sits 2 inches below that, and so there was a branch in front of my arrow, not my housing.
Right.
Just deflected the arrow.
Yeah.
Right. I think you just recently on he played for the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, Darren Woodson.
Yes, you were on his podcast.
Yeah,
and
he's an
talking
awesome
about that.
human being.
Yeah,
God,
it seemed like a really cool podcast.
He's such a
as cool as
solid
ours,
individual. No, not nearly as. I mean,
lie to me, Donnie. Come on.
Yeah.
He only has 3 Super Bowl championships.
Right. I'm working on my first. All right.
Yeah.
But no, he was talking about that, and he's like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just misses happen. People don't talk about them. That's why I love the authenticity of your work of like, hey, this is who I am. I'm a hunter. When you're a hunter, you're going to miss. Sometimes you're going to hit, not get, and that sucks.
Yep.
Especially as a bow hunter. That's such a heavy burden. I mean, we've all hit a deer and not got it, lost it overnight, But so I asked you today, we went to pick up our turkeys from last year at River Point Taxidermy, and saw Taylor, who's a great dude. But I told you I had this idea that I wanted to do on the podcast again today of like, what's your greatest miss? Mm-hmm. And by greatest miss, I mean it can either be the one that hurt the most, or I kind of would like it to be the one where you think you learned the most.
Sure.
I think we also talked about this yesterday, where misses are sometimes the most memorable, even though you don't.
That's when we were trying to bring me out of depression over Earl.
But they sometimes are. Yeah, you get a hell of a story.
Yeah.
Whenever you miss.
Sometimes the misses end up being the greatest story.
Right.
Or like building a legend of the animal to Steve.
Yep. Or
Steve.
Bob next to him. Like that'll be I think that's gonna be a really fun film to do. But I hit him. And again, I may have rushed the shot a little bit. It was the one on Bob was probably 35 yards, and it was probably 30 below zero, 28, 29, 30 below zero. And so, we were cold. And when he came out, I came to full draw, and he was just walking, and I had my pin pretty settled on him. I think basically my problem is that I was rushing the shot and not, when you have your pin on a deer, you're trying to make that wobble as small as possible, right? The misnomer and the thing that I went through for years, you asked me today, like, do you have any memorable misses? And I could literally roll through right now, and I will. I'll tell you, I could probably tell you like 5, 6, 7, 8 chip shot misses on very large animals that I'd love to have back, but that I wasn't doing. I target panic. And so every time it came to the moment of truth with a deer or with any animal, like my anxiety was through the roof. And so even though with Bob, the deer that's downstairs, like I got my wobble pretty small, but I rushed getting that shot off to where I was like, meh, stopped him. And then, rather than getting my wobble really small and just walking into that break, I got my wobble pretty small and then just,
punching it.
Didn't punch it, but basically controlled punched it, right? Like
rushed it. Yeah.
Rush, boom. Yeah. And it went off, and I hit him like, on a video, it looks like I smoked him, but I hit him in the brisket, 2 inches below his heart, and he ran off and then ended up killing him 3 years later. So I have misses like that, and then I have the one with Steve where I hit him hit him in the shoulder, and then killed him a year later. But I missed. So when I first started shooting a bow, I could shoot. As a friend of mine once said to me, for a guy that has no idea how to shoot a bow, you shoot a bow really well. So I would just put my pin on the bullseye and I would make my bow go off, just like all of us basically started. I would smash the trigger. I'd put my pin right on the bullseye and smash the trigger. Well, through how I've learned all this I learned it on my own through trying to fix myself, but then I really learned it from Joel Turner at Shot IQ. Right. He's really broke it down for me and said, you weren't broken, Donnie. You weren't being an idiot. What you were doing is your mind was creating shortcuts, because our minds create shortcuts. That's what they do. They try to make us super efficient. And so we try to go, instead of going A, B, C, D, we go A to D. Mm-hmm. And so I started, and I remember I was shooting in a tournament one time with a friend of mine, Stephen Herring. It was really funny because he was holding his pin below the bullseye. Mm. And he's like, hey, he literally looked over at me and he goes, hey, if your pin is below the bullseye, what do you do? I go, I raise it up. And he's like, what if you can't? I go, you can. You're in charge. And he's like, I can't. Like
1,000-pound weights on.
Like 1,000 pound. I can't. I can't get it to the bullseye. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he would tell me this, and I was like, is this black magic? Like, what are you?
What are you talking about?
Yeah. And then it got to where I would come to full draw on a bow, and I'd come up to the bullseye, and I got so comfortable with being around the bullseye, I'd just come up and just bullseye.
Right.
Bullseye. Well, when a deer is in front of me, like, I'd, come to full draw and just come up and just, as I'm really traveling, boom, and, and
rushing it,
shoot. And I can remember a deer, and the heartache, the heartbreaking ones are, so the bad ones that guys can appreciate. It's like when you're shooting at a mature, call it once in a lifetime or very few in a lifetime whitetails, right? I missed a 160-inch mega deer. Not only was he 160 inches, but he was like 6-7 years old in Iowa. I missed him at like 5 yards. Came to full draw. He was right there, and I just like, instead of painting, it's the aim small, miss small. Mm-hmm. It was the opposite of that. My pin would get anywhere near a deer's chest, and I just go,
yeah.
And my arrow went right underneath him, and the deer runs off. And that's difficult to take, because I'm looking at William Altman, the photographer on that hunt, and I'm just thinking, like, we've been getting up at 3 a.m. for the last 10 days, hanging tree stands, pulling tree stands down, scouting properties, hanging more tree stands, sitting dark to dark. Like, he's been doing it just as much as I've been doing it. It's my tag and it's my shot, but we've been doing it together. If I shoot a deer, it's our deer. We did it. And, when I miss that deer, like, just, it's not that I missed the deer. It's that I didn't shoot. I didn't do my job at all. Like, it was a complete mess. It was like I drove my car into oncoming traffic. It was just a mess. I was trying to do something macho and egotistical with, or however you want to say it. I was trying to do something where I was letting my ego or, whatever. And I remember, I'd get into camp and guys would be like, "Oh, you're Donnie Vincent. Like, I've seen some of your work, and oh, I'm so excited to shoot with you." Well, that would like I'd want to throw up.
Yeah, that's
like,
a lot of pressure.
Like, you're gonna watch me shoot, and oh yeah, we're gonna watch you shoot. And I'm like, I mean, I remember times like hitting deer like in the butt, not a deer, but the target, and they'd be like, "What happened?" I'm like, "Oh, I was just messing around, man." I was like, totally, like I did that on purpose. I was lying, and my palms would be sweaty, and so when you miss deer, and I remember I missed a giant mule deer in Alberta, giant, non-typical. I shot what would easily shatter the world record typical mule deer in Alberta. Shot him through the guts with a Rage 2 blade. After I got up on him, bedded down. Like, this is a clean 4x4 with eye guards, well into the 200s, got him at 35 yards, came to full draw. If I would have just waited 2 more seconds and had been comfortable with wrapping my finger around the trigger, and when he stood up, just found his rib cage and just pop. If I would have just done that, like, I'd have a mule deer in here that would haunt your dreams. But in essence, I came to full draw, and he stood up, and I just pointed it at the box of his body, and I sent a Rage through him. Like, he's dead. He died for sure, and I would have got him. It's a bad story, but I would have got him if we didn't push him. But the guy I was hunting with wanted to push him because it was such a big deer. He was fearful to leave him overnight and that we were going to lose him overnight. And so it doesn't matter what he wanted to do. And we lost him because this guy wanted to push him, but we lost him because I made a horrible shot. That's why we really lost him. But so I went through all this. And when you have mistakes like that on deer like that, it hurts. But when you have mistakes on like a Dall sheep that you've taken like 10 hours to stalk, and you've flown up to Yellowknife, and then you've flown into the Arctic Circle, and then you've ridden a horse 100 miles, and you've hiked another 12 miles, and you're sitting there with a crew.
Risking your lives.
Risking your life. And
else.
that Dall sheep finally walks out at 60 yards, and I don't even have a plan of taking a good shot. That's not even in my plan. My plan is to jerk my bow back, get my pin anywhere near that sheep, and smash the trigger, and hope it hits them.
Right.
And, and I did this one time with a mountain caribou, and the caribou was just standing there at 60 yards. Now, 2 things happened for me to miss, and I'm being dead honest, but I came to full draw at an index trigger. I came to full draw, and I just came up from the bottom and hit his chest and just went poof. And at the same time, I punched the trigger. So my arrow was going to go high anyway. But when a caribou runs, they throw their front feet out. They don't just start running. They literally throw their front feet out and they drop down, and then they start kind of accelerating from there. So he threw his front feet out. My arrow just went right over his back. And I'll never forget that day because that story is the greatest drink of water I've ever taken in my entire life. And one of the reasons why I appreciate sitting here with you gentlemen, I appreciate the fact that we have a roof right now and that there's food in the refrigerator and water comes out of the faucet. And because my entire crew and the guides on that hunt were dear friends of mine, Ben and Lauren Storak. Everyone was out of water. It was almost 100 degrees that day. We had been climbing up and down this mountain, trying to get on this bull and different bulls. And early in the day, we were so out of water that our lips were sticking to our teeth. That was early in the day. And then as it's getting into late in the day, and we get up on this huge caribou, and I take this shot, a shot that I have no business taking because I should have been coming to full draw, settling in, wrapping my finger around the trigger, and then pulling through that, and then watching my arrow do its job. Instead of doing that, I rushed this shot, and it goes right over the top. Well, now, by the time we ended up we stalked the caribou a few more times. One of my crew members, who's a dear friend, Chris Kirkaby, he couldn't even walk anymore. And we're going down these cliffs. I'm watching him fall. He'd fall onto the rocks every 5 steps. So
locked up.
Yep.
Yeah.
William took all of his camera gear. I took his backpack. So I now have 2 backpacks on. William took his camera gear. Chris is visibly upset that we have to take his gear, that he's not pulling his weight. He's really upset that we're almost as out of gas as he is, but we have to now take double weight. So he's really upset at that. I'm worried about him. He's falling uncontrollably. He hands me his water bottle, and his water bottle's full. And I go, Chris, I go, your water bottle's full of water. And he looks at me and he goes, he just starts shaking his head no. And I go,
Piss.
did you piss in your bottle?
Yeah.
I go, you peed in your bottle thinking we were going to have to drink it today. And he's like, that's how out of juice we were. And so like when you miss it, and then we went down the hill and we had miles and miles and miles to go. It's 100 degrees. Like it was horrible. And we get down and we're in this forest. It's like an enchanted little spruce forest at the bottom of this mountain. And we go in there and there's a ground spring boiling out of the water, and then it would create this puddle that was about the size of this table, and then it was this little trickle going down the mountain. And we just sat there and dipped our Nalgene's. It was, we had clean canteens, stainless steel ones, but like I was like, nobody mess this puddle up. Let's just one bottle at a time. We fill it halfway up, give it to Chris, and he just like he might as well have been drinking heroin. He'd fill it up half, hand it to William. He'd drink half, I drink half to Chris. We sat there and drank probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 bottles full. And it was like liquid cocaine. Like it was the most euphoric feeling I've ever felt in my life, feeling that cold water go down. So misses like that. So then enough is enough with that. So I was like, I need to fix this. And then I went and started reading articles from Forrest Carter, who owns Carter Releases. And he developed a release called a Honey 2. And it was a hinge.
Yeah.
And I started out in the basement with a 4x4 target. I'd knock an arrow. I'd come to full draw. I'd click the safety off.
Doing that
and back then I thought back tension was a thing. I didn't know that it wasn't. And I'd just get into my back tension and I just pull. And it'd go off. And like my heart would be beating out of my chest. Like every time I shot an arrow, it was shocking.
Just worried about that explosion.
It would terrify me. And it got to where I would just shoot hundreds of, I wasn't closing my eyes, but I would just I put a golf tee in the target and I would just bury that pin in there. And I would just tell myself, like, I don't even care if this bow goes off. And I would just sit there and pull. And sometimes the bow wouldn't go off and I clicked my safety back on and I'd let down. And I just sit there and I come to full draw, click my safety off and just pull. And it got to where I started to become addicted
the way it
to
felt.
the recoil.
Yeah.
And so now, like, I say this, Joel uses this sometimes in his class, but how I look at shooting a bow now is I do all my homework back here, and then when the bow goes off, it's none of my business. I have none of my business. I have nothing to do with it. And then where the arrow goes is none of my business. I have nothing to do with it. So that frees my mind to when I come to full draw, if I'm shooting an index, I wrap my finger all the way around that index. And then Joel taught me this too. One of the things that I was doing poorly is I was holding onto the whole release. And then sometimes I'd get into my back and I'd pull. But he's like, Donnie, what you're doing is
tensing up.
You're not doing anything with the trigger.
Yeah.
You're just pulling the string further. So he's like, let go of everything. Just the triggers on your finger. And he said, picture your arm like it's in a tube.
Yeah.
And he's like, and then just pull that straight back like you can't touch the sides of the tube.
Right.
And just pull them
and
go off. And so like when the bow goes off, it's none of my business. And tons of guys were like, what happens if a deer runs in? Literally never happens for me. It just doesn't happen. Like I've had deer run in and they stop and then you grab your bow and you click release on, you come, like you always have probably
you wait for that opportunity.
Triple, quadruple the time that you think you have. Like you think you have 1 second, you probably have 10 seconds.
Right.
And I got so good at shooting my bow and just enjoying that to where like I shot that bull elk right there and I was on my knees and I had my Honey 2 or I bought another one. I bought a True Ball something that was just like the Honey 2. It had a safety.
Yeah.
In that bull, he's at like 18 yards. He's got snot running out of his nose. He's staring at me. He's bugling right in my face. I had the wind and he's just...
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there enjoying the show. And then he turned to catch my wind because my wind was kind of quartering. So he turned to like see what I was. And there's a little hole. And I came up and I came to full draw. And I put my pin right through that little hole right on his shoulder. And I clicked my safety off. And my pin was just right on his shoulder.
Just dancing.
And I was just sitting there. And I was like, this is awesome. I was like, this is awesome. And I almost like forgot to shoot.
Yeah.
I was just so comfortable with keeping my pin on the bullseye. And then I was like, oh, it's now or never probably. And I was just like, just started. And I was just like, went off. And my friend Adam Roche was with me. And he looked at me. He's like, what happened? I go, I have no idea. I have no idea. I go, the bow went off. And he goes, you hit him? I go, it's none of my business. That's none of my business, man. Like, my business was aiming.
You did everything you were supposed to.
Yeah, my business was aiming.
Yep.
And my business was getting into my release. And then when the bow goes off, it went off. And
shot process, yeah.
Smashed him. And like, when I killed, I killed this sheep I killed this guy at 72 yards in a blizzard. And I had missed him once. But I wasn't shooting at him when I missed him. I just was coming up over this cliff, and I was coming to full draw, and all the sheep were down here. I was coming to full draw, and as I just, again, wasn't managing my trigger. I came up, it was like, boom, and my arrow went like 50 feet over their head, way down the mountain. And he ran out and ran around the edge of the rock, and there's 7 rams together. And I came to full draw, and my friend Frank Harris, we almost lost our lives together. He and I had killed 3 sheep together. And I was up in Toke hunting this ram with Lance Kronberger and William Altman and Alan Skinny McGinney. And we're on this hunting. And when I came to full draw, I was like 72 yards downhill. He's standing in a band of 7 rams. And I'm like, if I want to sit, when Frank and I would do our hunts, we'd go on our hunts, and when we'd be done with our sheep, when we go back to his house in Kenai, we'd buy a huge family box of Captain Crunch with crunch berries and whole milk, and we'd make coffee, and we'd eat that whole box of crunch berries, and we'd watch snow machine films. I had no interest in snow machining, but he loves snow machines and mountain snow machine. So he just make me watch all these videos of these psychopaths like jumping off all these cliffs, and like we'd sit there and eat cereal, and he'd tell me how many horsepower they had, and we'd watch these, and it was just so awesome. And so when that ram was sitting there at 72 yards, and we'd been in a blizzard for like 10 days, freezing cold, where like I didn't even bring a jacket on that hunt, and we were just freezing. Like, I was putting my hands in William's mouth to like help get my gloves off, and when I came to full draw, I was like, if I want to sit at Frank's kitchen table, and we used to call them fun coffees because we'd drink black coffee all the time, but after we killed a ram, we'd use creamer and sugar. So I was like, if I want to sit there and drink a fun coffee with Frank and eat Captain Crunch, like I have to make this shot. And I put my finger on the trigger, and I just remember that pin just dancing on that ram's shoulder, and I was like, this is for Frank. And I was just like, slowly pulled on the trigger and just, and I was like,
no,
oh, it's freaking awesome, and I made another super trick shot on, there's another ram in here somewhere.
Not the guy there, is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the ram. That's the ram that I shot at 72 yards. This is the ram that I was about to tell you, but it's a stone sheep. And,
Yep.
But anyway, are we good, Matt? So I've had some catastrophic misses is what I'm getting to, but I've also made like this. Okay, so this isn't a doll. This is a stone that I killed with a bow. That's the doll that I'm talking about with the 72 yards. This guy was 49 yards. And in the alders, like he had bed down in the alders, and I was glassing at him, and I could see where these leaves have started to turn yellow. And I picked this tube. It's like this big. I picked this tube through the alders all the way to where the big ram was laying, and then there was a little ram, and I could just tell by the body language that the big ram wanted to bed where the little ram was. So I was like, if he stands up and turns and goes that little ram, I'm going to get a shot. And that's what happened. And when I got that shot, he started walking that direction, and I came to full draw, and I had index trigger release, and I put my finger on the trigger, and when he walked into the hole, I just literally had my pin on his body, and I acted like I had nothing to do with the system, and I just pulled that trigger as slow as possible, and I watched that arrow go right down that tube and smash him. Yeah. And so, like, when I've taken those critical, Joel calls it the critical second, and Joel always says thinking aren't thoughts. So you can't. That's what I was trying to describe to you guys when I'm trying to do this macho thing. Is like, I'm Donnie Vincent. There's a giant buck at 10 yards. It's a chip shot for me. I'm going to smash this thing. Like, that was thinking art thoughts. I was telling myself these idiotic stories, and I was lying to myself, saying like, you're Donnie Vincent, you can do this. And I knew that was a lie.
Yeah,
I knew that I had a major issue. But with Joel, he's like, you come to full draw, you wrap your finger on that trigger, and you're putting your pin, you get your aim right away, and you watch it to keep it, but you leave your aim. You leave that aim because you watch it to keep it. Like, it's kind of like in your background, if you will. You watch it to keep it. You leave that aim and you transfer all of your thought process to this trigger. But instead of just like smashing a trigger, you have an active thought. And like he says, he wants you to go, like here we go. Yep. And it goes off, right? He wants you to transfer to that actual thought of like, have a thought going to that shot. And when I started doing that, and I did it before I met Joel, and I used a biohack, and Joel taught me that because that honey too had a release, that I could come to full draw without any consequences. And then once I was set, I could click off of that. And because there was no trigger, I couldn't punch it.
Right.
Because I had the determination enough not to just rip it every time.
Right.
And I used to think back tension was a thing.
Yeah.
And so I'd get into my back. I used to think back tension made it go off. So sometimes I'd sit there for like 20 seconds just like
squeezing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm into my back.
You still have to rotate, yeah.
And then I watched a seminar one time with Levi Morgan. He's like, back tension's actually a total lie.
Yeah, you can punch the shit out of a back tension.
Yeah,
too.
and I was like, wait a minute. And he's like, yeah, you actually still have to rotate to release. And I was like, oh, that makes so much
I was actually at Nationals in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and I learned the hard way because I thought I was king shit too. Mm-hmm. And I was a young archer, shooting pro, and we were down there in line of 200 shooters along the line. So I was shooting NAA spot. So those 3 spots, they mess with your mind, like an animal would,
Yeah.
So you're trying to get on target, and I learned under pressure, and it usually happens under tremendous pressure, that you want to start racing the trigger.
Shortcut.
Yeah, and then I got to the point where I had that 1,000-pound weight on my arm, and I couldn't pull up on the dot, and I would rush it. I was shooting a Stanislawski hinge.
Yep.
But mine was a 2-finger. I'd come back, and I found the hard way that the 4 and the 3 fingers didn't work because I was able to punch him too easy. So I went to a 2.
Yeah.
I actually missed the target. I was top 3 shooter in the nation at that time, and I missed the target at Harrisonburg and hit the back of the wall in the gymnasium.
Yep.
I completely fell apart.
Yep.
That was the end of my archery career. At that time, I hated it. Then after that, I mean, I was in ball tears because like it wasn't fun anymore. You know what I mean? So I know that feeling, like where it's just.
That's what I tell everyone. Everyone take Joel Turner's course.
Yep.
Do it in person if you can.
Yep.
If you can't,
I'm halfway through it right now.
Like it is. Like I said this to Joel, and he kind of giggles, but I'm dead serious. Like I think you should have to take Joel's course before you take hunter safety.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I go to the archery range now. Like I walk into my local archery range to shoot, and I'm shooting a longbow now, but I walk in there and, like there's 20 guys on the line shooting and 99% of them are...
You can see it.
Oh, it's just...
You can see it, yeah.
They have no idea where the arrow's going, smashing it. They're hoping for the best. And I was with a buddy of mine and I was like, dude, watch this.
Yeah.
I was like, this is what you can get. I'm like, I'm not special. Like, not special. And so the local archery shop has a banana. Like when they're doing like... range night or whatever, the local little shoot-offs or whatever. So they have a banana, and so what you have to do is you have to go down there and take the banana and you let it go and you start swinging it, and then you got to shoot it. They're just doing things for fun, but this it's being held on by basically like
the string,
like yarn. Like you can't even freaking see it. And I told my buddy, I was like, watch. I was like, I'll shoot the banana off. Like I'll shoot through that yarn that I can't even see. I'll shoot through that yarn. Give me 3 arrows. He's like, there's no freaking way. And I was like, watch. And I come to full draw, and I know I can see the yarn enough that there's kind of this ghost image, and my pin is just wandering around on the yarn. And I don't care where my arrow goes, none of my business. So I'm just wandering my pin around as small a wobble as I can on that yarn, and I'm just walking my honey back and just first arrow,
cuts
banana on the ground. He's like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yep.
He's like, that thing is like your arrow is like 4 times as wide as that yarn. I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
And he's like, how did you even see it? I'm like, I'm not aiming at the yarn. I am aiming at the yarn, but I'm basically like aiming at that ghost line that I see.
Right.
And because I don't care, because back in the day when I'd be like, oh, I'm going to shoot the yarn, I'd be like, God, I hope I hit the yarn. God, I hope I hit the yarn. And then I'm trying to time, but our minds are way faster than our hands are, right?
Your mind's always going to try to predict that explosion.
Yeah, and it's always trying to put it back. So if I leave the aim, if I have my pin just floating around on that yarn and I leave that aim, I see it, but I'm just leaving it. Then I go back here and I go, just walk that thing back so slow. The bow goes off, and it goes into the yarn. And then I fixed myself, and I was, Joel makes fun of me sometimes, but I was at ATA one year, running to Joel's seminar on target panic, everything I could read. And I started looking into it, like Fred Bear almost shut down bear archery because of target panic. I bought a book called like Archery Done Right by like Bernie Pellerite or something like that. And he had all this voodoo stuff to kind of fix you. And then I read this article from Forrest Carter. He didn't tell you how to fix target panic, but he's basically like, take the honey or honey 2, take a big bail and just start shooting arrows and you'll get really comfortable. And I did that. And then like, I really fixed myself. And then I was running to Joel's seminar, and like, I was with Lee Chose and a group of people stopped me because they wanted to introduce themselves and hear stories and whatever. And I ended up talking with those gentlemen, and I missed his seminar. And Joel and I weren't friends at the time. And then I ended up meeting him at a different seminar, and we became dear friends. And now he's my archery coach. And he was just here a couple of weeks ago and stayed at the cabin for a couple of days. And
his son's Brody, right?
Bodie, yeah, he's unbelievable. Yeah, he's unbelievable.
Cleaning house.
He's unbelievable.
He is an unreal archer.
Yeah. He's 16 now, but he's on. Like I shoot with him all the time at their house.
Yeah, he's cleaning house.
Yeah, he does really well for himself. So, but anyway, so that my misses led to learning from Joel and to really developing a shot process, and now shooting is so much fun. And I shoot rifles the same way. I shoot, like I told you, I shot my first pistol shot. I hit the steel at like 60 yards because I shot my pistol the same way I shoot my bow, because I was like, I got my
it's all the same thing,
red dot and as small wobble as I can. I'm just squeezing the trigger and
control the shot.
I even shot a belt-fed 338 machine gun, which was so funny because I was with this machine gun crew in Texas filming, and he's like, "Donnie, you want to shoot it?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I get on this machine gun, and I'd never shot a machine. I shot machine guns before, but not with mindfulness and purpose. And and I got the crosshairs on this fence post, and I'm just squeezing. And then finally it's like, boop, 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 boop. And the head machine gun guy's like, "Were you squeezing the trigger like a rifle?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "That is awesome." He's like, "That's not how you shoot a machine gun." But he's like, "I wish I could teach that to the guys that I'm training." He's like, "Because no one will sit through, but that's the only, if I break that rule to myself, I'll go down the same dark,
slide down the dark narrow path." Yeah. Well, that was awesome. I didn't think we'd go down that rabbit hole, but no, that's great, because I know you not always, but like I know your struggle with target panic, and you've been very vocal about that and very complimentary to Joel Turner and his shot IQ. But I did look at our camera, and we are running out of time. I wanted to give you enough time to thank some people that you work with.
I don't do it often enough, but I get to work with some really special companies, and I have throughout my career, like Hanvog Boots and Fjallraven Clothing and Maven Optics, and I end up doing podcasts or doing some commercial work or just doing interviews with people. And I don't thank these companies enough that have really been with me since the beginning. And it's really important, the companies that we work with and the people that we do stuff with. And almost all the relationships that I've had in the industry have come from me purchasing gear from them, and then they see the gear in one of our films, and then they reach out to us. And in this last year, the reason this kind of occurred to me, or you and I were speaking about it today, is I've been filming my gear lists, and I've really been enjoying doing that, because I don't I don't have a certain DNA where I'm not like, I really love Kuiu gear, but I'm not sitting there wearing all Kuiu. I really love the Fjallraven gear that I wear, and I work with Fjallraven, and I really love pieces that they have and the functionality that they have in different things. And so I'm fortunate enough to be able to test some of this gear and to, work with companies like Maven to figure out the rifle scopes that I want to use for certain platforms and which binos am I taking on which trips and different spotting scopes. And so I'm just very, very fortunate, and I'm very thankful that when I sit back and do like my gear list, I realize that I have this hodgepodge of a recipe of this sleeping bag and this rifle cartridge and this optic and
but that's what people love, because you like what works.
Right.
I like what works, and so the companies that we work with, that's how these things have kind of come about. Is like I work with Benchmade now, and the reason I work with Benchmade now is because I always buy a Benchmade. And I would always lose my Benchmade when I was crawling after a caribou or crawling after a whitetail or a turkey. I always lose my Benchmade out of my pocket. And so I started writing them like, I lost another Benchmade. Like, you guys got to help me. I need a moron system where that thing like ties to me. And so then their sales guy was like, it's hilarious. Like, hey, I'll send you a knife. And I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, which one you want? And then he'd send me a knife, and I'd get back to him. I'm like, dude, I love this knife for this, this, and this. And he's like, well, let me send you this one to test. And like, grows into a relationship, right? Same with Maven Optics. I had Swarovski stuff. And then it was through a different deal. It wasn't mine. It was through a different group of guys. And I split off from those guys. And they said, hey, you have to send all that Swarovski back. And I did. And I called Lee Chose. And I go, hey, I need optics. And he's like, when you leaving? And I go, I'm leaving in like 3 days. To Alaska for several weeks, and he called Brunton, and he had done tons of work with Brunton, and I mean the next day Brunton sent like $15,000 worth of optics to my house the next day with no questions asked. Chose used to work with this young lady named Danny, who was just a super dynamic, super intelligent woman that ran Brunton. Well, Maven, all the engineers from Brunton, because Brunton stopped making glass, all the engineers from Brunton left Brunton and independently went on their own and started Maven. And so it's like I transitioned right from using Brunton for like 5 years into Maven, who are the exact same guys that were making my Brunton and now making Maven. And so I'm just so thankful for the relationships
I can attest
that
to Maven glass. I love Maven
glass.
Oh,
it's sick, dude. It's really good. It's really sick, and what they're able to, the price points that they're able to sell because they go direct. And but yeah, I'm just thankful, and I'm thankful for you guys coming out. And I'm really thankful that I have the life that I have, and that people watch the work. And I'm really excited about. I'm probably the most excited about the projects that we have coming up now, and I think it's going to lead to years of storytelling, that a real collection, a real library of work that we have coming up. So
I'm excited.
That's going to be
You showed us that teaser, man. I was excited about it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for everything, man. Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you very much.
This is just part 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, we have one more day left here before Jared and I head home. We're going to try and smash a couple longbeards tomorrow. Hopefully the weather holds up.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
At the very least, we're going to get together with our buddy TJ, who's been a turkey calling extraordinaire for you for a while.
Yeah.
He's an expert scouter. He hits the pavement, man, and I can't wait to share stories, because we've had a lot of fun with him, and we've ridden with him a lot here the last couple of days.
We formed an amazing relationship with TJ.
He's former LEO, and even at that, he's a really good dude, and we've really grown a friendship with him. Him and I rib each other a little bit, which is what friendship's all about. And no, man, just thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Appreciate
Thanks
it
so much.
Thanks, appreciate your guys' service and the work you do, and
we appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just it means the world to me. It's just you guys keep everyone's family safe, and you risk your own hide to do it every single day. And people, particularly this day and age, they don't realize how difficult your job is. And if we were able to run simulations for people, common people, to have to enter the situations that you do every day, the fail rate would be 100%. So.
They would understand a little bit more.
Yes, they would. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Until next time, hopefully this is part 1 of the second time of hanging out with Donnie. Until next year. As I invite myself back. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much, Donnie Vincent. We really appreciate you. Keep it going, man. We love your work.
Yeah.
And we will catch you next time on the Blueline Bowhunters podcast.
Thanks,
Peace,
guys.
everybody.
Check out the Blueline Bowhunters on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or their website, www.bluelinebowhunters.com. Thanks for listening.